Hi everyone. Welcome to our channel and enjoy your viewing. We will be very happy if you like and subscribe. A pink-haired girl with great green eyes dressed in a dark gray garnet floating in the wind. She looks scruffy and her body is covered with lances. This child is known to the world in the middle of the novel. Previously, she was a prominent Japanese girl in the name of Kyoko Ishikawa. However, Kyo died and was reborn in the book world. The girl's childhood is simply beautiful. Like the daughter of an aristocrat, she always takes away all the best things. The best skin, the best clothes, the best joys. In a word, the child does not need anything. When a girl whose name has changed to Lure, there are 9 fates. The fathers call her to the lush garden. There they want to get to know one guy. This fair-haired boy is the son of the Duke of Rochester. And as Father Lure said, the girl's future boyfriend. Lure is amazed at this new thing. There, standing with his hand raised to his mouth and wide-open eyes, he tries to guess who the Duke of Rochester is. Now and then, a boy with very dark eyes, Lure leans over and says his name, Calix Rochester. Calix is the main character of the novel in which the girl was spoiled. His father is not just a duke, but one of the most prominent aristocrats. The position of the Duke of Rochester the Elder in the marriage can be compared with that of the king. Raptum Lure will be born in the future. When Calix leaves her, she will be named. The girl, who was hitting the boy with a stick, wants to take revenge on her new passion. Lure has killed a lot of serious crimes, so he will be condemned to death. At that time, the girl will be only 20 years old. Little Lure turns to reality. The images of adult Calix and the further tragic fate of the girl herself are familiar. Deaton is calling for the old man to look at the fair-haired boy in front of him. But it won't calm me down. The girl begins to tremble and loudly says, "No!" Then Lure falls to the ground and starts crying. The child faces the prospect of death in his 20s. She doesn't understand why they, so happy at once, will turn into hell in 10 years. Father Lure and Calixa say this is the behavior of a girl. The stench immediately kicks up the white Lure and tries to calm her down. Dad smiles nervously and takes the crying child into his arms, where the teachers here prefer it. A decade later, the children are already sitting at a small table near the luxurious Altanza. Father Lure pours tea for the children and also gives them a piece of delicious chocolate cake with half a half. However, the girl just can't calm down. The words of Calix, who promises to give Lure his dessert, do not help. Suddenly, the little lady came up with an idea. The girl believes that since the love of Calix led her to the grave, she will never be seen with him. The hour is passing. Lure and all the names have already grown. The girl was sensible. She didn't finish dressing up and didn't get involved with the Duke's son. Who knows? The share of the whole thing escaped the surroundings. Ale, Lure, and Calix. Trying to be unique as one, they all became a couple. The girl said that her plan was not carried out through the boy's intense magnetism. Yo, sweet voice, popularity among other people, wealth and wonder can ruin your head, even if it's a girl. One warm evening, Shikani stood on one knee, gently kissing her tender hand and asking him to spend the night with him. Marveling at his deep blue eyes and sensing his honeyed voice, young Lure could not help but be drawn to this proposition. A decade has passed. A girl dressed in a light white robe is sitting near the bedroom of the Duke's son. Her eyes are wide open in recognition of what she has done. Unfortunately, the novel about the tragic fate of Lure, who is reading, also says that the girl will spend one night with her husband. The young lady fights and immediately shouts that her life repeats the plot of the novel. She wanted to wait for the girl to appear, so she could please Calix and give the boy to her. If anything could be done, it would be better to do it differently. However, Lure is not going to make peace with this. She has angrily shining green eyes and says to herself that she will never become a villain. If you read a novel about the life of a girl, it takes a whole month before the main character appears. The young lady is about to take it into her own hands and still sever all ties with the Duke's son. Lure will ponder over this. How to earn money. Various options come to mind for the girl. Let's go. The young lady was lost in her thoughts, but didn't notice that she was not alone. A few seconds ago, Clarix arrived in the bedroom. I feel the words of the girl. The boy clenches his teeth into the image and feeds the girl. So why say that? Clarix walks up to her betrothed, puts her hands on her shoulders and says in an embarrassed tone, "Don't you hate me?" The girl looks surprised at the boy's wrapped-colored waist, and she screams at him in shock. Calix! However, the Duke's son is not going to let Lure go so easily. He feeds the girl about her self-esteem. The young lady at this hour feels guilty before the boy for her words. It's also good to put yourself before her, and it doesn't deserve almost that she's named and wants to come in. In the morning, Lur collected her thoughts, looked to the side and wrapping a strand of erysipelas around her finger, told her that everything was fine, and she was simply gushing. Firaz denouncing the lad is just right. Vin takes his hands from the girl's shoulders and says that he's already complaining. Lur understands that her plan to behave coldly with clerics soon failed. Then the boy, having felt a raptish surge of tenderness, took his bride in his arms and looked straight into Lur's eyes as she was cackling. The girl says, "I'm also screaming for you." Tears flow down Lur's cheeks. The young lady's heart continues to sink. Clerics carefully lowers his betrothed into a gentle position and promises that he will be gentle with her. Lur, already hypnotized, is incredulously amazed at the lad's appearance and decides to allow herself to spend one night with him. The young lady says to herself that there will be only one more night after she will be seen as a lad. However, Lur, who warmly embraces the betrothed and inhales its scent, understands that he wants it to last forever. On the street dosh, 3 days have passed since the first night of Calyx and Lur. The girl, as she said, honestly gets all the boy's uniqueness. The young lady does not match on her leaves and shows her on her shoulders. In a word, Lur will do everything to get clerics together, and at the same time the unlucky future, as he expects the girl, as she and the Duke's son will be together. However, the boy does not give up, and regardless of the fact that the girl ignores him, continues to try to win her respect in various ways. For example, on this day, Lur took away as many as 5 bouquets of beautiful flowers from her husband. With these tickets in her hands, the girl sits in her room and thinks about clerics. The young lady immediately guesses that in the novel, the plot of which her life suggests, the Duke's sons did not show such closeness to Lur. The girl is already twirling the last flower from the bouquet that clerics gave her in her hand, and she's singing loudly. Vaughn doesn't know what to do with everything. Then Lur puts the card aside, raises her head and wonders how her coldness could change the plot of the novel, and therefore her life. But then the young lady marvels at the side of the book, where she is depicted in misery, and understands that she cannot change the main points in this story. There's no way to escape the filthy ending. In the wake of the girl, a thirsty picture emerges. A rainy day, a treasure trove, where a lot of people with parasols have gathered. In a small, modest grave, Calyx sat and wept bitterly. As if the girl did not want to marry the Duke's son, the share would be the same for them all at once. Then Lur turns to reality, puts his hand on the table and loudly calls out to his servant Anya. A dark-haired, gray-eyed girl looks into the room and says, "Did you call for me, gentlemen?" The servant admits that the girl wanted her to bring a pen and paper. The girl flattens her eyes wide and prefers to say so that the servant burns the lips of the Duke's son. The servant is shocked, and even at all events she saved all the leaves from the name Lur, and now the girl wants to protect them. That girl does not lose respect in shock at the servant's accusation, and continues to talk. Vaughn no longer wants to accept gifts from the Duke of Rochester. The servant wonders even more. Then the maid tries to silently cross Lur. You can say that it is possible to think everything over for now and not make hasty decisions. However, Lur, with his arms crossed over his chest, cuts them off and seems as if everything is over. That young lady and her soul is ruined. The girl doesn't understand why she feels like she's doing everything right. A voice from behind the door of the room whispers to the young lady, hesitantly, saying that the young Duke of Rochester has come before her, who really wants to spoil her. The girl is starting to get nervous. She was by no means ready before Calyx showed up in her booth. At one point, the servant thought that the Duke's sons would be on the verge and would never leave again. Lur. In shock, Lur opens her eyes wide and clenches the cloth with her fists. This stubbornness of Calyx shocks her. Then the young lady looks straight at the window and thinks that it's wrong to fluff up the Duke for a long time standing in the cold autumn background. Lur suddenly turns around and runs to the door. The maid tries to listen to her, but the girl doesn't hear anyone. All their thoughts are filled with Calyx, who might catch a cold due to the bad weather. The girl runs along the luxurious corridor and is a little angry at the young Duke, telling herself that she has gotten out of trouble. The tendentious valleys of Lur stick out from the important doors that lead to the street, with the intention of subjugating them. Cover up the girls. She finally decided to meet Calyx, but she still yearns for her. The girl's green eyes glow angrily. A second later, the young lady opens the door and angrily says, "Calyx, I told you so." The boy has no respect for the anger in his betrothed's voice and is glad that the smells have settled. The Duke's son is all wet but full of satisfaction. Vin is tired but smiles happily and says to Lure that he's already bored without her. The girl, having soaked Calyx so much, skillfully nourishes him, that everything is good in his head, and that he will work if he catches a cold. The boy, who has already been serious for a little while, lowers his head and doesn't even boast about words, even in order to protect her, Vine, Calyx, having now sealed his body. And after this pretentious proclamation, the Duke's sons raised their hand to their shoulder and looked away to the side, as if it was really cold on the ground. Lure, whose nerves are no longer visible, shout at the lad, nourishing him, "Why won't he put on his cloak?" Then the young lady orders the servants to prepare hot tea and towels for the wet guest. 2 young servants bow to her and go to complete the order. Lure takes the great hand of Calyx in hers and asks for it from the house. True, in her thoughts, the girl is desperately hoping that the Duke's sons will deprive her of one. The young lady and the boy are already in the room, warming up from the fireplace. Lure stands behind Calyx and says that his ignorant visitors are starting to fight them. Now the girl's servant is beginning to be afraid of the confined young Duke. Raptum Calyx is picking up the girl. She seems to know very well that Lure wouldn't dislike him without reason. Calyx gets up from the sofa, goes up to the girl and asks for information about this reason. The young lady, holding the boy's naked torso under his open jacket, sits down. The girl wiggles, her lips droop and her eyes begin to run. Lure has one thought in her head. Calyx understands everything. Sometimes the boy, who has not yet rejected the evidence from the name, tries to guess the reason himself. Calyx nourishes without forming veins the night they sleep. Lure, why tremble for a little while, say, "No." The young Duke said, "So why did you hate me?" The girl lowers her head guiltily, squeezes the cloth with her hands and speaks in a sullen tone about the gentleness of Calyx's words. In her thoughts, Lure doesn't know how to explain to the stubborn lad that through the Kana he will face death until now. The girl squeezes the cloth and says, "Vibach, Calyxe." Then the boy asks the young lady a teacher whom she had never quite realized, "Perhaps you want to marry the prince?" Lure opens her eyes wide in shock and repeats, "What?" She doesn't understand how excited the prince is and why Calyx started talking about her. Not knowing what to say, the girl turns her head to the side and thoughtfully wonders at the pretext. The boy takes this reaction as a firm confirmation of his nutrition. He says with a doubtful look, "So I know. So that's the reason." Lure feeds to herself, "In the sense of so I know?" The young Duke seems to already know that the prince is satisfied with Lure. The girl looks shocked and asks Calyx again, "What?" The young lady just can't understand. The guy knows. Edward Westwing Aberonia, a fair-haired lad with a great grin, is the king's other son. The prince is Garni, intelligent and talented. However, there is one drawback, a complex character. Edward respects all common people as slaves who are obliged to serve him. He overwhelms his servants with an inordinate amount of work, threatening them with punishment in the event of the unexpected execution of his orders. Most people in the kingdom know about the greedy stories in which the prince was the main participant. For example, Edward drank with his servant and flocked with the most powerful magicians of the empire like clowns. Leaning on the back of his throne and crossing his legs, the lad asked them to please him kindly. As soon as the prince learned about the bonds of Lure and Calyx, he became aware of the maiden in the Kohana. Edward told her to leave young Rochester and marry him, the successor to the throne. That Lure, in the eyes of which the prince was simply an intolerable person, resolutely advised Edward. The girl was really sorry for this incident, and she didn't tell anyone about it. The girl directly looks at her betrothed with an angry look, bites the cube and wonders when the boy almost hears about the prince's announcement not far away. Calyx gains a little bit of humility and says in a calm tone that Alan, the young lady's brother, has learned about this incident. Feeling that his brother has upset Calyx about this, Lure begins to become fierce. Let's say that love won't get away with Alan. At this point, Calyx, who watches over the girl's anger, grins sarcastically and says that Nibby Lure secretly became friends with Prince Edward and asked him to be friends with her. Then the boy, no longer streaming laughter, adds that the prince, without any deep thoughts, was happy to accept this proposition. Lure doesn't understand at all what is going on here. The girl widens her green eyes and feeds the duke's son. What are you talking about? Calyx seems pleased that the stench from Lure will soon begin to play happily. The young lady thinks that 2 months is a fairly short term. Before the appearance of the main heroine of the novel, the plot of which is based on the life of Lure, there is only a month left. If the girl can sweat for as long as an hour, then she will change her share. Calyx, not noting the deliberately virulent denunciation of the named, said with a chuckle, 2 months? So you're talking. It was like that until yesterday. The girl looks splendid after these words. Their gaze conveys anger and anger at the same time. The young duke slyly closes his eyes to say that plans have changed. He will have fun in a week. Lure, who doesn't even bother to scream, nods loudly to the boy as if he had begun to understand. This shock can be explained. Even with Roman, everything was different. Sometimes the boy, who has not yet noticed the wonderful behavior of his fiancée, gently burns Lure to his chest and feeds, and is glad that after a period of time, they will become a man and a friend. The girl does not share the enthusiasm of the son of the Duke of Rochester, and thinks what will happen if he and Calyx immediately become friends. And a month later, the main heroine appears. The girl who is in the middle of her betrothed, who has his nose buried in her horny hair, realizes that they will simply throw it away as an unnecessary toy. For an hour, Calyx continues to lovingly trim the girl, who doesn't seem to care about anyone, but simply stands with her hands down. Lure just can't believe that they're just throwing it out quickly and then throwing it away. The girl is already starting to feel embarrassed, even though she tried so hard to get rid of the greedy future, that he glares at her. But all these Zucilia, rather for everything, turned out to be muddy. Raptum Lure screams that he doesn't want any of this, and sharply looks at the stunned boy in front of him. There is an oppressive silence in the room. Neither the young duke has been ruined, nor the maiden who has been seduced. They don't know what to say to either one. Lure lowers his eyes and thinks that maybe Calyx doesn't understand this at all. But it will be better for everyone if she's scrubbed until the main character appears. For an hour, the duke's sons are a little bit before the young lady, touching her soft hair with his hand and says, "What's wrong with you, Lure?" The girl decides to collect her thoughts, clenches her hands into fists and decides to rush towards Calyx, confident that soon everything will come to her senses. Gritting his teeth, Lure encourages the boy to open the wrists. Of course, it is unacceptable and painful to say words, otherwise it is required. The Great Wall anniversary ticks faintly. The atmosphere becomes increasingly tense. Calyx nourishes his betrothed, who is in his respect. The girl stretches her arms forward and tries to push the boys out of the room, saying to get out of here. Calyx of enemies with such behavior. At first the girl says that she wants to open the bonds, and then she tries to kick him out. Lure didn't have tears in her eyes and asked the young duke to just forget her. But Calyx says that he can't earn anything. The girl opens her mouth wide in shock. Vaughn doesn't know what she's doing. The duke's sons are surprised at what it's good to do, but not at Lure. And he continues to say that he can't just take and leave his girlfriend. He decides to approach the young lady and hugs her dearly, saying that there Lure Eckley should be left to you. The girl on the table herself is enraged, so we can't turn around. The girl looks up at her betrothed with her bright green eyes and says in a quiet and pitiful tone, "Calyx?" The boy doesn't hear these words and whispers in Lure's ear that he won't tell either the prince or anyone else. Then she squeezes the girl's hair with her fingers, pointing her nose at her horny cap, as if not to allow her name to flow in. Lure begins to babble. Such is the behavior of a lad. This is no longer the same Calyx she knew before. The girl crawls up to the boy's breasts, frowns, quietly sits down and says that she's scared. Calyx, on the other hand, continues to hug the young lady. The street is angry. Lure lies on a bed in one of the rooms of the Eckley booth. The girl thinks that this devil, Calyx Rochester, is simply obsessed with her. The problem is not in anyone, but in the fact that the young lady cannot understand the reason for this obsession. Lure lifts her head from the pillow and speaks loudly, "So you can't believe everything." Then the girl predicts that Calyx will come from nowhere. The lad, tenderly holding the young lady's hands and staring straight into her eyes, calmly, and would like to say that the stink, Calyx and Lure, are bound to be friends. Then the duke's son adds that they have no other choice. Their friendship is a share that cannot be changed. Lure mumble, but there is still chaos in her head. Vona bites her lip and thinks that Calyx doesn't know what her share means to her. That girl can't overcome her feelings towards the young Duke of Rochester, and seizes him with the thought that if it weren't for her, she would never have accepted him. Lure revealed how life could have been different for her, as if the plot of the novel was not so plausible. The stench could be soothing to happy lives. They would be a wonderful, happy couple. We could go for a walk, spend an hour at once without all the hassle. Prode, it's a pity that we can't live up to reality. Lure shook her hand sharply. Even though it hurt more, there was no other way out. This could have changed the lousy plot of the novel. Vona knew very well that she would be leaving in a month. She showed how she would be on her knees asking for mercy from Calix and her new betrothed, and did not want this. Nikolai. The aristocrat did not want to be separated from her man in the future. I didn't want to become a villain. Thoughts about political assurances for the powerful class of the population were spinning in her head. Images of the black faces of those present at such parties, and the names themselves emerged. Right now, everything is in full swing. Everyone is happy and bursting with joy at the young couple. But later it's always painful and the fire bursts, bringing someone greedy suffering. In addition, the girl knew how sensitive people would be about her. Everyone will be whispering and talking about the girl. The squad doesn't care who is guilty, even if the reputation of the squad itself is rotten. Sitting with her back, Lure thought about why she had such a lot. God is guilty of hating her, and in any other way let us explain what she experiences in her life. If you want to live the life of young girls, you can't even tell. This is true. There is no way out of this. Lure fell into a lukewarm state. She was already thinking about how the night would pass, but she didn't have anywhere to go or what to do in the future, how to live after this, how to survive until the end of her days. The girl saw and realized that she needed to eat, even though she was tired of her experiences. Having read the thoughts, the gentlemen, the servants came into the room. Vaughn brought a late-night snack and Lure deserved it. She immediately called the maid to her room. The servant is a nice girl. She told me that on the orders of the Marquis, they prepared her favorite food. Mademoiselle eats everything tastiest at once. Lure passed the look at the table with the hedgehog. Everything she loved was truly there. Sandwiches, sweet pie, and pheasant meat, everything for happiness. After spending the night with Calix, Lure developed a wild appetite. She couldn't get enough of it. Apparently, her father is praising her for her, as if ordering her to prepare an evening snack. It deserved it. Such thoughts sparkled the soul and gave hope for better things. She was very fond of her father and loved him very much. The maid interrupted the girl's thoughts. Vaughn said that she lightly seasoned the herbs and the stench became juicier and stronger. Lure's eyes began to light up, even though she was really hungry. With a captivating look, the young aristocrat of the village of Supper was exposed. Vona thought that she really wanted pheasant meat and was satisfied with the snack. The girl also thought that she needed to eat more to get into a better mood. I was confused for a second. The meat didn't suit her. That's a bit of a wonderful taste. Lure let it simmer so that it could be sizzling. On the other hand, in the Marquis's mansion, they did not save zipped products. Raptum Lure became so disgusting. I'm sick and started to feel nauseous. This was amazing for the young aristocrat, and this had never happened before. Vona huddled behind the table. The instrument and figurine of an angel fell sharply and loudly. Calix marveled at the statue of the broken angel Moshka. Its dark shadow hung on the ashes of the room, illuminated by the month. He raised his cheeks to see the broken decoration. Holding it in your hands, thinking about your lot and those why everything in your life turned out this way. It was so rotten. Pressing the wing to your chest, the boy lost his mind and had no mercy. Even if his plan was perfect, he could not have mercy. Why does everything seem to be like this? Calix's eyes were pierced by a darkness. Vin guessed the dialogue with Brother Lure. He was busy talking about those who were a little bit about the recognition of his greatness to the young betrothed Carlos. Those who still didn't know about the situation with the prince worried about his companion. Calix felt unhappy and was defeated. The blood ran out of the boy's hands, squeezing his hand in front of the broken statue of an angel, which painfully wounded the skin of the valley. Thinking about the fact that the prince is really brave, as if he is planning to marry him with a woman. Calix sat by the armchair. His gloomy thoughts did not leave him. The young man sang to himself that the prince who laid his eye on his Kohana. The child was simply enraged. It didn't help at all. Calix was still writhing through him, but without noticing how blood flows from his hands. Blood dripped onto the angel's tricks, Calyx has not yet been able to take it into his hands. The snare cut into his skin, but left him unmarked. One thing that happened to you, so that everyone can understand about your journey to the beautiful lure. Calyx revealed the first Zoostrich is Kokonoi. She was still quite small but incredibly beautiful. Those emerald eyes could not deprive anyone of their lives. Then I got a taste for the incredibly strong smell. He was not worthy of her, but he was still very happy. Just the sight of her chilled me to the bones. So she then pulled him out, but the emotions behind her look could not be expressed in words. Calyx was happy thinking about his future squad. To get closer to the sorority of the Kohana wine, add a glass of Jusil. She was unique, she boasted, and she worked tirelessly. May you be filled with respect. Even before, the lad was not the same as today. His soul was black and bloody. He changed, became kind, got rich. And everything is for her, but today she's starting again. Why? The young man didn't understand. So we understand that such as you need a lot. The image of the tender and incredibly beautiful lure comes to mind. She stood there and the pellets of the Trojans fell. Heavy Kaidani weighed down my legs. We did everything we could to become listenable. The tears flowed from Lure's eyes. Vona admired the dog's spoon. His hand was injured. Having earned wine for her, she did not know what to do. Calyx gave it some time to think about it. For the sake of wine, having squandered under the boards, giving yourself greedy tastes. Everything is for her sweetness, but she didn't give in any way. This did not give the young man peace of mind. It drove him crazy. Yet his sacrifices brought success. This show of kindness became a trap for the girl. She gave in and the boys began to arrive. You know the way to her heart. I tied my hands. These became kaidans for her legs. Prot lure is not for the nobility. Let her not be deprived of good Calyx. In this reality, the image of their bright, happy couple emerged. You need the affection of a girl, binding until new, so that they marveled at this new one. He loved him and was faithful and heard. We will never let her go. That's it and that's it. Calyx revealed Kaidani on the nose of Kohanoi. He is in love with her and in no other way he doesn't care about her. I've been sitting in Calyx's room for a month now. The chandelier shimmered with colors. Calyx's hand was twisted and hit the blue chair. He continued to think about Kohana. About those who won't be too fond of it. In reality, the images of lure emerged. With clear green eyes, soft white skin, and a sweet smell. The boy crossed his legs and sarcastically washed it, so as not to allow it to flow in. It was late at night outside. Lure in pajamas and quietly walked along the corridor in a homely manner. There were so many things swirling in her thoughts that they didn't give me peace. One of them was vagueness, appetite, nausea. She had never experienced anything like this before. But it is contagious and everything indicates the birth of a new life in her body. How could this happen? The girl tried to take it into her hands. According to her evidence, she was drunk, but she realized that she needed to contact a specialist. It's up to you to give evidence on your nutrition, and now it's too early to talk about what's to come. Soon the doors to one of the rooms creaked loudly. Prot in the night silence, the sound sounded booming and Lure bawled, but she herself came to this location. Behind the doors stood a young girl with violet eyes. Vaughn was excited about the late visit of the young aristocrat. Lure herself was not in captivity. Standing with the lectar in front of the girl, she seemed to be drinking. All at once she wanted to cry. Alice! Lure became furious before the Spivrozmovnitsa. Lita, having taken into account the guest's words, said that she was Vagitna. Unreasonable fear appeared on her face with a bright grimace. Lure was sitting opposite the bedroom. From the snuffed ready-made, I recognized those who were eating. It was hard to say, but all the same it was all over the place. The girl with purple eyes listened respectfully to her unfortunate guest. Navia couldn't capture powerful emotions. She was also shocked by the news. She was shocked and couldn't believe it. This is where the drainage comes from. One food, as it was said. Which is true and what is the Duke of Rochester? The girl was starting to get angry. Emotions changed one by one. Vaughn told Lure that they are not friends and it is completely wrong. Already it was not so bad. The tiredness of Vaughn with good guesses confirmed that this was inadvertently caught. Inadvertently, Alice could not help but say. Vaughn admitted that Lure's nausea was due to stress, not vaginism. Naturally, such a condition manifests itself differently on the skin. In any case, The symptoms of an aristocrat are very early. The doctor asked me to unfasten my clothes. Otherwise, the patient's situation can be verified and find out what the truth is with her. Lur had a good time, but it didn't last long. Vaughn wanted to know the truth. Alice walked up to the table, where she saw a wonderfully shaped diamond hanging from her eyes. Vona explained that this is a magical artifact that can be carried out with precision and reveals all ailments, conditions, and diagnoses. The doctor took the patient's hand and made a slight puncture of the skin to draw her blood. For a second, Lur noticed an unpleasant sensation of pain, but it all went away. Vaughn explained to the young girl that it is possible to change the color of the artifact to red, which means that it is exactly 9,900 units. The tour tensed up, and according to her appearance, the drink drained again. Vaughn immediately wanted to know the truth but was afraid of it. In those seconds, when drops of blood fell on the artifact, the girl began to think about her actions, which are related to pregnancy. More precisely, she didn't know what to do in such a situation. Absolutely. She also knew that in a month Calyx would be buried in her. In such a situation, you will be a burden on your back. There are also words to hate their child. The girl didn't want this, she boasted, and understood why she had such a share. How can the stench be separated if there is a child in its bosom? It's a goal for the rest of life. For her, that little one. She showed the image of a happy bet and committed herself to an unfortunate bet. For such circumstances, Lur hates Calyx and will be named Yogo. Vaughn wants to kill them in the camp of a villain, as in the original novel. It was clattering and did not give me peace. This could not have happened, even if it had already been reported that everything would be completely different. While the doctor was doing the quilting, turning her back to the patient, she could not take everything into her hands. Raptum Alice became furious with the girl. She chuckled. It became even worse and worse. Nowadays, this share will be revealed. The artifact became bright red. The new light illuminated the entire room. And after chewing the red threads, out of fear, the doctor then said to Lur in front of her that it looked like she was starting to freak out. The girl was in a tight spot. Vona couldn't get the words out. These greatest realizations have become a reality. Lur fell into a lukewarm state and tried to take it into her hands. There was no price for it. Vaughn has already revealed her future share. How to make fun of her, how to feel distressed. I hate it. Their lives will be sealed. I remember this dream. Vaughn played it so often that it started ringing. Lur holds the hand of a little fair-haired girl. What a child. They climb up a little wrapped. Their arms are cut off and the child's man in the black shadow is pulled back. Lur protests because he can't earn anything. Her heart bursts with pain. The tiredness of the man who is clearly visible. Calyx tells the girl that the woman is in charge of her, not her mother. The child is worried, but we can't do anything. The woman in the snow-white dress tells the child that she is her good mother. She had black hair and the same color eyes as they marveled at the girl. In her heart, Lur screamed that she was a child. I don't feel anyone's protégé. Unhappily sitting on the floor, the young aristocrat called Calyx and her new Khan. It hurt more than this. Marveling at the homewrecker in a white dress, Lur called out to her in all troubles. It's your fault. It's all because of you, the unfortunate girl shouted. Under the veil, the woman in the white dress clenched her teeth in anger. Vona didn't care that she was guilty of the troubles of Lur. Their eyes began to shine. Vaughn said that God Finnis gave her something holy and happiness. I bless her because she deserves it. Calyx's blue eyes, she didn't stop talking. She believed that in this world everything was created for her. And I hope Calyx will lie with her in the near future. Vaughn marveled at Lur as she sat on the underside of the Lakmita, and said that she had great mercy on the unfortunate woman. All of them were important, because the plot and part cannot be changed. Ye share misfortunes, sorrows, paths of health. In this world there is nothing that belongs to Lur. The scene suddenly changed into a terrible motor-like movement. The young aristocrat was tied to the stave with a thorn lying on top of her, which injured her lower skin. The sun was rising on the horizon, but Lur was not destined to arrive. Age was dying in agony, and the birds were already watching for her death. The girl did not understand why she had such a fate. She was scared, she didn't want to die. Her fault was to attack the saint. The aristocrat wanted to kill her, but she wouldn't say goodbye. Yi share is to die at the fire, and they have already begun to fire him. She endured many years of torment and death. Only such villains can earn God's mercy in thy work. I was scared. My eyes were burning. Vona revealed the image of Calyx. His eyes are dark, his hair is lighter. The fire was set on fire and it was approaching Lura. She was in more pain, she was screaming, but she was not hurting anyone. No one was harmed, even though they were guilty and there was retribution for it. "What is all this for me?" cried Nishazna in mortal agony. Images appeared in it. Vaughn greeted the child as she marveled at her mother's tears and asked her not to cry. The little girl began to sing that she was lying to her mother. Vaughn praised her. She wanted to hug another person. Madam, Lure felt. Vaughn quickly opened her eyes. It's so good that they woke up and this terrible dream ended. It was disgusting, scary. Having drained the cold drink, the servant stood worriedly in front of the ward's bed. She was fiddling with the towel in her hands and begging for help. She complimented the young girl, asked about sleep and how she slept. Protler could not get the words out. It was scary all the time. Vaughn didn't understand what had happened and who had said it. Prot Shvidko took it in her hands and confirmed that she didn't remember anything. She asked me to pour some tea and tried to calm down. There was noise in the corridor. The doors to the aristocrats' chambers were opened. Behind them stood maids and servants. Lure washed away her thoughts, and everything was getting worse. It was all great. The servants carried towels and bedclothes in their hands. They were urged by the elders to receive their calls. They all ran around, boasted, and tried to make money. Lure's servant Ani was amazed that her mistress knew nothing. While she was pouring tea, she told the young aristocrat about the remaining potions. It appears that a saint has appeared in the place. Lure was stunned. Her eyes widened. It seemed like she had already understood everything. It became very bad. Vaughn huddled behind the chair. The servant asked her to sit down and make some hot tea. Tse was guilty of helping. Alilur realized that nothing could help her anymore. The girl thought about the servant's words. She realized that it was too early to sleep, but she still couldn't figure out what was true. What is holy is effective in the area and will soon be tested on it. Lure covered her mouth with her hand. For her, this new thing was too thirsty. What should she do now, like work? And now she has another person alive. It all happened too early. The perspective has shifted to Saint Calyx. He kissed her hand and buried himself in the woman's hand, with the high castle in the background. The young couple enjoyed themselves for an hour at a time. In the original novel, this woman was to blame and would appear in a month. It made Lure happy and depressed. Fawn thought about Calyx again. There was a lot to do now. He's still not a good guy. It's possible that he's already got rid of her. Possibly it's already starting to sway at first glance. Everything did not give the young girl peace of mind. Vona bit her lip nervously. It seemed to be not so strong before. How can you be jealous of him? Everything is not right at all. Only when she sees her betrothed in the midst of others, her heart breaks. This is an unbearable burden. Lure saw the image of Calyx and thought that she was a fool. She tried with all her might to be unique, portrayed cruelty and coldness. It's too late to think about inheritances. You won't change anything anymore. Never mind Calyx and rightly left her. These thoughts filled the young girl with all her might. No tears flowed from behind her ice eyes. So she knew that everything would be like this. Vona knew the plot, tried to change everything, but nothing happened. And now it hurts so much. This is too heavy a load. Lure did not know a way out of this situation. There was no yoga. Vona still didn't believe that the table was useless to Calyx and meant nothing to him. This was not put into their heads. Ali wrapped him, they took him away. Vona turned around to the window. There was something clicking there. Ta, Blakitny bird. The girl glanced at the new one. She looked out of the blue and suspected that the dark creature would fly into the room. A light breeze, like Lure's hair sticking out, immediately blew into the courtyard. Birds flew out of it at the same time. Tur immediately realized that she had sent Calyx. Ale still didn't know what that meant. The beautiful bird started burying it. The girl marveled at him and marveled at the unearthly beauty. In addition, she seemed to be filled with thoughts about Calyx, or more precisely, the story of the new one. Ajilur Maijibula sang that the Kohani went to the meeting with the saint. It doesn't appear that way, but not everything is so bad. Possibly the plot can still be changed and Lure does not worry about the terrible fate of death in agony. If Calyx sent the bird, then that already meant. The young woman was named and the bird flew towards her. She was filled with thoughts about what Calyx might still be thinking about her. Birds sat on the girl's hand, and this gave her even more hope to confirm her thoughts. And before that, in the original novel, Calyx was not guided by a bird. Then, perhaps, they will still be able to change the plot of the novel and their fate. And in the novel, Lure was not a woman. This is exactly what everything meant. Birds looked at the girl with a smile, and she was still in thought. There the bird burned. She began to hope that Calyx would not leave her, that everything will be okay and the thirsty lot will not sleep. Look, you can even change it even minimally. It is up to you to get along with Calyx from now on. Talk to him. A castle and a white servant appeared in the background. People were walking on the street. The girl quickly got up and ran to the castle. It was her intention to tell Calyx the whole truth and almost everything. It was similar to the original novel. She wanted to be with Calyx and nothing else. For whom should we save everything? It's impossible. Lure at the yellow dress, having embellished and bolstered her figure with a brown, incredibly beautiful corset with a parasol, was already pushing up to the castle. It's your fault to talk. A meeting took place outside the hall. 4 people were sitting at a table covered with a white tablecloth. One of them stood up and called to go to the head of those who stinked up here. The others, it seems, were dissatisfied and unsatisfied with what was expected. They were bored and uncomfortable, but they wanted to sit until the end. Vlasna Rozmova stooped to the goddess. Even the girl who knew the divine tree at the great temple could have been a goddess. Moreover, they have been checking on it for a long time now. And if the pods were formed in such a way, then it would be a good idea to hold a holy day in honor of such a great pod. The man who sits in charge of the person who is speaking with a serious look has washed away that he is good to go. This idea of truth was important and good. This is what the holy day and honor deserved. Golovny, on whom I collected. Calyx was also in good condition. However, it was absolutely not good for the assigned and then brothers to take part in the negotiations. Just thinking about the end of the day. That's why all my thoughts were hanging around Lure. You can see her image, the horny hair, the emerald eyes, that incredible smile. She was her Kohanoi and at that moment wanted to get together with her. This was all too bad. The lad still tried to sit at the meeting, even though it was important and part of his obligations. With all my might, I tried to listen to my colleagues, got on good terms with them, and spoke as usual. But everything didn't work at all at the moment. The state of the aristocrat was marked by the prince, who is the sitting envoy. So he was also not very happy that he had to leave the hall as soon as possible. The protest alerted him that their camps were not similar to Rochester. We tried to find out the reason. The Duke of Rochester, becoming a lad, that one in his blackness would have even lowered his eyes. Prince Jartum asked about the Duke's appearance. It seems that he didn't really deserve today's collection, and it was obvious. Moreover, the reason for this behavior was well known to the spy, because about the name Calixa and her endless Kohana had been known for a long time. Besides that, it also showed something else. His bright violet eyes sparkled at once, crowing, and there was no place for the goddess in the aristocrat's thoughts. Even if everyone talks about her, it's amazing that Calyx ignores this topic. While others were talking, young people were busy with other things. The smells were still talking about women. More precisely, the prince revealed the powerful story. It was similar to the situation in Lure, because the boy also couldn't breathe steadily. It's not just similar, it's about the same woman. The prince's demise faded. Lady Eckley is a real beauty. Having guessed her image and her kana, she became stronger again. Having also guessed the day of Calyx's divorce from her brother. When I told her that Lure had confessed to the Kohana prince, Calyx was defeated, hated the prince, and never gave up his Khan. Having thought about it, I turned it to reality, friend. He confirmed that Kohana Calixa is really incredibly beautiful, and in my opinion, there is nothing marvelous about her, even if someone were to snort at her place. Young man noticed that the girl is not so simple and does not get stuck in the first place. Besides the fact that she's nice, she's also smart and understands people. The atmosphere in the hall began to tense. The boys were already speaking out loud, and other people were respectfully watching what was going on. The Duke of Sweden confessed to the Spivrozmovnik, as far as I know. One temple confessed to Kohana Lure, and I immediately rejected the negative evidence from her. Eunuch, with violet eyes, marveled at such words. You immediately began to feel dissatisfied. Rose and Calyx shouted about the break. He quickly stepped onto the platform and turned his back to the other lingering anger, preparing to leave the hall. I was bored by the meeting and everything that happened there. You knock Vishov on the street. Having inhaled the fresh air, you seem to have relaxed a little. But she still didn't leave Yogo. No one had the urge to turn around in the tedium of a meeting with the same people. The fresh air brought in more and more of the smell of the Trojans. Tim, moreover, guessed about Kohana Lear. Kalix shook her head as she began to hurt and thought about the meeting. We understand that we will be careful until the evening, and this is not what we should have done. They began to cry, not understanding why the goddess might be wagging Vin Mriav about the Zustrich from Lure. And most of all, my thoughts were occupied. Prot, standing with his back, didn't even notice how they were walking behind him quietly. However, having noticed someone else's gaze on him, he turned around sharply. Having treated a beautiful girl with black hair like the wind. She was truly beautiful, and she made Kalix happy. I lost my mind before my eyes. AJ melodiously was the goddess herself. Prot Vinnavit did not manage to utter his lowered voice. The beautiful black-haired girl did not take her eyes off the aristocrat, and cried out even more buried and appraised. Here in the garden a girl's voice was heard. Vona said that she didn't know how she was. Looks like the Bula has been ruined. Lure. She got lost and gambled for herself, even if she was 20 rocks, and there otherwise the little child was lost among the tea gardens. She was shaking her steps, searching her way out. Ale still did not understand the importance of this garden, which belonged to the prince. Of course, if you are heartless, but in such a jungle you are still a fool. Their long dress and horny parasol had already begun to quarrel, and they were crying out for an even more stormy situation. Lure could no longer get over herself. The blatant ones have lost their fear. Vona did not want to be left in this jungle until the end of her days. It was no longer funny at all. The girl kicked herself for not taking the servants with her. Such a lady, you can't bear to be alone. It was already late. If you want to get caught like this, it's no longer the case. Lure was especially guilty of this in her childhood. All the thoughts from that hour were lost in her head. They often rushed into the place for a snack, arrived all wet, and then had fun. And she was not at all tired of the fact that people praised her for her. Then my father found out about it and put my daughter on house arrest. This, of course, embarrassed Lure, but she soon repeated everything. Today she made a fortune about Kalix, about Yogo words. Even if he said that he is the same as he is, she wanted to instruct him immediately. The lady thought of her image. Once again, the blue sky, our ocean, eyes emerged. The smile is bright and the boy's posture is bright. Ye, dearest adverb, most beautiful. I can't live without him. Lure wants to meet him sooner. Vaughn kisses him and wants him to hug him dearly. That's all it is. The more you can become a man, the more you can kill him. The girl immediately sensed a voice. Clicked ye. The sound was coming from behind with a man standing behind her. Vona turned around sharply and couldn't believe what she said. At once the girl's eyes began to brighten with happiness. And it's not surprising at all, even if Kalix marveled at her. What a mess. I was thinking about that one. Isn't that a share? Prot Vaughn was disappointed. Unfortunately, she no longer realized that it was Kalix. The prince called before her and he was accompanied by a servant. The girl took the shortbread in her hands and lovingly greeted the prince. We therefore asked you to call him without formalities simply Eddie. After drinking, Lady Eckley came to meet with the Duke of Rochester, even though she was talking about her throughout the meeting. Promovlia sezi persmishkosh. Allure did not suit the tone of the rose. Prot words about Kalix filled her. For her it was so important and very sweet. But the prince seemed to have quickly interrupted everything, having warned that all the young people would quickly pass by. Tim is even more respectful of those people who often get into trouble with others. If Kalix hurts Lure's heart, then she will always have a backup option. The prince turned to the lady and confirmed her guesses about his candidacy. Chu quickly interrupted the scene with the voice of the prince's servant. Having washed his deputy, he has an hour to return to the meeting hall before the break ends. Of course, this did not impress the prince, the deputy, and the truth. Having washed the rest, we will check Lady Lure for any circumstances. For what reason? It was amazing and it impressed me, albeit not in a good sense. When the people moved away, Lure muttered in her voice that it was okay for her. Vaughn didn't feel anything about the prince and still began to hate him. For a second I wondered about those that were being scuttled. She didn't deserve this scene, and the only plus here was that she knew the way out of the jungle garden. Vlasna, she followed them to get out of the garden, even though she was already succumbing to her trap. Through the sprout of Kvilin, Lure looked out from behind one bush. Vaughn was wondering where she was. They looked straight at the exit. So in truth, she got out. Their appearance shone with happiness. The girl happily walked straight to the castle, enjoying the Trojans and thinking that the garden was to blame for such things. Beautiful flowers, a fountain with great statues, marble columns, incredible sculptures of architecture. The axis of the garden in her mind. It is the temple of God that is to blame, not the jungle. Raptum started clicking. She started thinking about the marble columns and amazing sculptures of architecture. And it's not surprising. Even right in front of her, the girl gave away what she wanted so much. The great temple of God with marble sculptures and incredible, simply incredible architecture. The table was so great that I couldn't find a table so beautiful to describe it. Protlur interrupted her burrow and wondered about the goddess Saya. Vaughn didn't want to hang out here, but she was convinced that she wouldn't go out for a walk. All of Shvidko's hopes were ruined. At the gathering, the goddess herself stood in front of the temple and Calyx kindly prayed for her. We caught as much as we could. Calyx, and truthfully it seems, was buried by the coronavirus. He stood very close to Saya and now recognized her. And she really was beautiful. She was wearing a snow-white dress with a gold strap that miraculously enhanced her figure. Her black hair fell on her shoulders, blown by the wind, and her eyes shone with a black sparkle in the sun. Calyx has joined forces with Saya. They said a nice word to each other. The goddess said that the Duke was very kind to her. The smells laughed at each other, poked each other, and Lure was still chattering. So she knew that it was too early to spend too much time. The stench of the culprit was beginning to settle. But still the girl was not, and was not ready for anything. No matter what, I don't want to give away my brother. And I started burning and forgot about it. And at that hour, Saya and Calyx came up to exchange a kiss. Lure is not the main character of this story. So it was a shame to take this trace into your own hands. Otherwise you couldn't earn anything. Tears flowed from her eyes. Parasolka fell out of her hands. She didn't believe in those things and didn't understand why everything was the way it was and not the other way. Why with her? Vaughn marveled at the man in the same dimensions and her heart broke and ached. In other words, they stabbed me with a knife. Lure squeezed the dress in her hand, but there was pain in the image, shock. Lure never stopped portraying herself. She really appreciated that she was still a complete fool. I marveled at Calyx, Saya, their dear Rozmova. Look at each other and once again exchanged words with her imperious stupidity and mercy. Tears flowed from her eyes. It became even more painful and unacceptable. Vona didn't understand what she was doing. Even though she knew the plot well, she tried to change it and still ended up in Calyx. Why did it get so bad? The girl could not and did not want to understand. It was much more painful at this moment. Still, this is the share. She didn't even want to change it, but it was impossible. Calyx will not be there, there will be no stink, and there will be no happiness. It's up to the goddess, and she's powerless here. Vaughn couldn't lie to him, even though she knew about their death. I foretold the day of the funeral. Then the weather was crying, and even a strong rain was pouring from the sky. Calyx was in even more pain, and she supported him as best she could. In addition, the girl always continued to chew on him, knowing that she would lose the villain in people's memories. I foretold the warmth and tender embraces of the Khans, which, incredibly, no longer shone for the lady. And today's news could not change the share. Calyx is at once a goddess and at the same time kind. Everything turned out to be guilty. Lure could not take it into her hands. It became worse, and my tears did not force me to go. The girl could not overcome the pain, apparently, of the image. The bird sent 2 names in order to convey the size of the bird. Tato Zustrich Ziso Jeyu. And that didn't mean anything about Kanya and hopes, as the aristocrat thought then. Vona fell into disarray. She continued to cry. Her heart really hurt, and even though it was deeply broken. Prot, who will now be with her child. What's her job? On a daily basis there were no symptoms and it was the worst. That and the burning child was not in the original, so what will it be now? Donka will be born without a dad. The daughter of the villain Lure Ekli. Vona did not want such a share for her own blood. In reality, the image of Donka emerged. Unfortunate, I hate everything. They will discuss almost to the death what is the right thing to do in such a situation, if there is no way out. No. We can't do this, Lure. We can't allow this to happen. You want to change the plot, steal the Donka so that it doesn't happen, and regardless of the sacrifices that may need to be made in the future, Lady Ekle will not allow the domineering child to die through her mother's mercy. Vona took it in her hands. grabbed the parasol and suddenly gave up. I was very sad and wondered what would happen. Change everything that can be changed. Otherwise this child will not suffer. Not any other way. Donka Ekli will live happily ever after and will be a better mother. Standing at Lure, they felt the sunshine. She looked great and bright. And it's not surprising. Even though it depends on how much it's been tried, it requires strength. The perspective has changed. A picture appeared at the station. There were a lot of people on the platform having arrived with a bright red draft. "What did Elisa see me off?" I heard from the other end of the station. Dr. Elisa, who had previously carried out the quilting and showed vaginous. Lure said that she trusted the lady. Moreover, I am ready to do everything that is needed for her, as long as she understands the reason for what is happening immediately. The one that Lure still wanted to go to. And that's all, because no one knows about her child until now, including the Duke of Rochester. And that's why you have to go. This is the only chance to change your lot and save your child's life. This is the light in the middle of the novel. Vaughn knows that in the future camp she will be a villain, but not to allow this to happen. Do everything you can to change the plot. I'm expecting an unfortunate end. No, this cannot happen. However, those who were surrounded by images of Calix and Saya, she took them into her hands and did not care about them. I just thought that the day will come when I tell anyone about her unfortunate lot. Protthink Lure Shvidko interrupted Alice. Vona is worried about her figure, has overfed her and smells her burning. Lady Eclair continued to listen to the doctor. She told about the island of Jula, where the aristocrat was planning to go. It was also called the end of the world. There the winds are very strong, and there are often torrential rains. In short, the weather is not at all pleasant. Until then, villains and pirates hesitate. Elisa overfed and still sang to Lure that she wanted to live there. She firmly confirmed, carefully holding the bag in her hands. Although Lady Eclair wanted the doctor to make such a decision, she realized that there was no way to tell the senses, because she still wouldn't listen. She has no choice and no understanding. Lure was still thinking about those who had to disappear without a trace, even though she could not change her share of power. And now there is only one way to decorate her camp, to avoid the death of her child. If she goes from a local place to those, about which there was no language in the novel, she will not stand up for the power of life, and change the single output here. The pull was already checking for the passengers. Alice forgot to tell the aristocrats. It turns out she got in touch with a friend who lives in these parts and got home about it. She spoke with a smile. Friend will help Lure. He is very kind and will be in charge. The girl was very much a doctor. Protea shook off the sweat and said that she would want to help such a beautiful lady. Ekli was so quiet. Alice said that her patient was the nicest person in the world, and she was very glad that I could help. She touched her and hugged her. The girls exchanged funny phrases in a friendly manner. After this, the doctor encouraged me to buy Lure milk, which was sold at the entrance to the station. The aristocrat had a good time. She was even more hungry. Alice quickly walked on the hedgehog, saying that she would turn around soon. As she walked, she shouted for Lady Ekli to let her know that they would be approaching her. This made the young girl laugh, but she nodded firmly to her friend as she walked down the road. Al still got along with Elisa. There were too many people at the station, and it seemed like the Mother of God was dead. She pulled on her cape and scarf, curling it up to reveal herself. Everyone was amazed at her. This alarmed Lady Ekli. She didn't understand and seemed to be suspicious of the reason for such human behavior. Their father and brother don't know anything about departure. And they don't find out until nightfall. They definitely didn't give him a break. The girl guessed about her relatives. Vaughn felt greedy, depriving her of the leaf and not having a special conversation. Everything was wrong, but everything was instantaneous and the only way out of the situation. The aristocrat also came up with the image of the Khan. It was so bad that she deprived Calix so much. We can't see your arms, your smile, the look of your bright eyes. It's your fault to hate him, but you can't. This is how the fate unfolded, and tears dripped from the girl's eyes. She was in love with Calix for the meal before her for the entire hour. For kindness and everything that you give. Wrapped him in the middle of the crowd, Lure shook her head. So Calix was at the station. What have you forgotten here? This girl was crying even though it was so innocent. Protnejivin came for her. Ali is so possible and the signs are out of recognition. Ali Calix did not look at the middle of the kokon. People whispered to each other that simple people, like stinkers, wouldn't cook anything. After the appearance of the goddess in the place, they strengthened the security, and now they check every person and do not unfairly suspect ordinary people. However, everything changed for the better and the common people were left behind. Now everything has become clearer. Calyx kissed Saya. Then what do you see? Alice interrupted her thoughts. She brought the milk. Lady Eclair quickly went to meet her friends. Ale raptum ye stovknov, some man without breaking the ice. Let the droplets of flights fall on the background. Alice was overwhelmed by such nonsense and went all the way with her mistress. That man didn't ask for a liberation and was greedy. Lure quickly lifted the drop and confirmed that everything was fine with her. You want to sit down and stretch more quickly. At one point became unprepared. Lure's eyes widened. These droplets fly in the wind. She tried her best to be evil, but nothing came of it. And then Calyx stood in front of her. Vaughn was hooked. This was definitely not part of our plans. Kohanitskavitsia, why bother here? The stinker's gazes sharpened, exposing Lure drained pet. Everything was wrong, but it could have been more greedy. We have finished patrolling the station. Let's go. They heard from the station. The red tug was still standing and waiting for the hour of dispatch. Calyx gave the order to the security forces to leave the station, since the security forces had checked everything. They listened to him and planted him. It was not right for Calyx that the whole country should stand on fire because of the goddess's presence there. We were tired of this, and the whole unnecessary patrol came in and fought for it. Vlasna, raptum vin pobachiv Lure. And she was already shaking even when she was working at the station. This Kohana stood on the platform even without a drop of water. If the handrail is lying around, then it is already a rotten sign. Calyx began to move around such a turn. He didn't understand anything. All the puzzles in his head have come together neatly. You understand that this lady wants to go, lest she need to address this situation. In order to call a girl to you, you need to use a little magic, bringing the droplet closer to you, and therefore itself. In the dark eyes of the boys, they washed away the food. He doesn't believe that he wants to go and deprive him of one. The stinker's gazes sharpened. Lurbulas divovana tanalyakana. She definitely didn't deserve this Zustrich. Calyx, having eaten the girl, why bother here? That whole time I couldn't pick up the words. Potiag began to signal about the Swedish Yogo exit. Passengers were asked to take their seats. Lure realized that you might miss something, but that definitely wasn't part of the plan. That's why God's decision was made that day. Vaughn shouted to Alice to run, and the girls made quick noises in front of Calyx. Lady Eclair took her friend's hand and began to pray for her. The pieces fell from their hands, but they didn't survive. Alice didn't understand what to do, but there wasn't an hour yet. The girls began to flee. Calyx, having realized that he was trapping, also rushed after the girls. He hooted at her Kohanoi and shouted after her. As soon as they sit at the drafts, magic will block the doors. Alice came to her senses and began to help Lure reach the door. As if the girls would stop washing anymore, Calyx would stop them. Elivin didn't catch up for a second. The boy bumped into the door, but it was already too late. The stinks were blocked. Through the window, Calyx shouted to open the doors, but heard no one. It was already unbearable. Lure's heart clenched and it hurt more. Vaughn marveled at the Kohan and asked for a study with tears. The girl said that she wanted to open the cords. It still hurt and hurt the betrothed even more. Eunuch didn't understand why he should say such a thing, and it would be good to open the doors. Everything was fine. He screamed and demanded that the doors be opened. Starting to get angry, there was no sense in the world. Lady Eckley marveled at this scene, and it became even more painful. Vaughn cried and Alice cried. She asked me to forget about her. The girl turned her back to the door and almost began to smell herself. Her friend helped her with this, as she was the assistant. Calyx on the platform is still angry. Yogo's teeth clenched against the rot. Vin shouted that he would never let Kohana out. His emotions did not stop and did not subside. Eunuch continued to talk about those stench from Lure that I share. Divchinu posada divuvat Yogo behavior. Lady Eclair confirmed what these words are. And we started kissing the other woman. Calyx himself, who is also his province, has healed her. He spoke kindly to her, smiling sweetly and hugging her tenderly. That scene flashed through the girl's head again. Lure said that she was hurt more and Calyx did the wrong thing. The girl said that she didn't know anything about her. Everything is wrong and the stink is to blame. Don't be surprised by anything, nor by Calyx's words, nor by his actions. You already have your share. Never mind the words about Zakis Lure in the first place. On their lower edges. She shook herself into something new. but still didn't know and didn't understand or feel. Calyx was still screaming that she didn't understand the Kohanoi, screaming that we couldn't do it without her. Vona cried and clenched her fists until they bled. She asked me to finish it all, but I didn't even bother with it anymore. Eunuch asked not to break your heart. And the rapture became more wonderful. Lur shouted to her betrothed, so that he wouldn't look shy before her. Vona knew that she wanted to wake her up. Elisa was no longer on fire. Lady Eclair with tears asked Calyx to let her go because it would be right and it would be better. The girl did not stop crying and asking to forget her. It was more painful and unacceptable. Vaughn wished for a happy life with the goddess. Calyx could not believe what was happening. The boy shouted with a yelp, even without realizing that his Kohan might be on the safe side. He hit the door with his fist and asked to obey them. After all the efforts were made. The draft collapsed from the platform and the boy was deprived of his own power supply without water supply. Alice tried to calm Lur down. The girl fell down and cried bitterly. The friend hugged the lady. She asked me to take it into my hands and spoke encouraging words. Everything was fine. At the station, Calyx is still standing. Vin not knowing that Lur is small in respect. One more day and it could have been nothing, but everything became completely different. It is your fault to make friends earlier. Another few days would have been lost for my client. Well, now everything has changed. And this is the greatest thing you can eat. Calyx could not believe that his name had entered. The Duke collected all the patrolmen. Having finished reading about trains directly, you were told that the route goes straight to the kingdom of Aaron. Calyx clenched his fists and gave the order to reinvestigate the girl. Having said that, there will be checkpoints at the skin station. It's your fault to know a young girl with horny hair. Know and bring to no-go. All the patrolmen were shocked, but the order of the aristocrat was not discussed. In addition, Calyx supplied another brain. The girl must be whole and healthy. The security was in a state of confusion, and Calicum had washed his hands so that he would not give up and hide Allure for any circumstances. No matter where you go, who you will live with, you will definitely know them. And this hour the red draft went far and far. While Lure was sitting in the compartment, Calyx promised that she would know her, no matter how many fates would pass. The reason is simple, to give you money. An invisible thread of horn was entangled in his hand as it was on Calyx's hand. There is a beautiful booth on the sea birch with a panoramic view of the lighthouse. It is wooden, has white-brown tones, and has a three-surface surface. Here in one of the rooms you could feel a child's voice. There were very few crumbs at the gatherings. It seems that the child had little important news for her mother and hurried to her to find out. A fair-haired girl with a blue bow on her head showed her little ones to her mother in front of a yellow notebook. Vaughn said that Letty was painting little babies. Mother glanced at the Suk of Lanim, a woman with brown hair, emerald-colored eyes like my daughter's, with the strength of a girl. The stench was seen by those who were daubed on the arches. Vlasna. There the child portrayed the posture of Father Evil, her mother on the right and in the middle. Seema grabbed her baby by the hand and felt happy. Behind the father's back, the little girl was painting a krill. Letty, you're so good for me. My mother gently washed and hugged her daughter. Since that day, exactly this fate has passed. On the way to the island of Julalur, we had to go through a number of checkpoints. Alas, Alice got here without much noise. Here she gave birth to a daughter. Lure thought about that day with tears. The child took the best rice from her and Calixa and was incredibly beautiful. The girl was named Letitia, whose fate corresponds to her 6 fates. Krikitka was a very sweet and kind child as she loved babies and grew creative. Lure held a cup of green tea in her hands and spoke to Donka. She asked what the people wanted for their day, which was tomorrow. Letty confirmed that she didn't need anything, even though she knew that they didn't have any pennies. Her mother said that all the money was spent to make her proud, and she is not to blame for saying so. Lure said decisively that she had pennies for a gift for her daughter. I fed it again with whatever I wanted. The girl became thoughtful. Vona thought for a long time about what she wanted and needed. The little girl said that she would have been even happier if her mother had put on a beautiful dress and pinned her hair up beautifully. Letty said that if Lure would walk around calmly in this terrible dress, she would not be at ease. I wish my mother were happy and beautiful. The woman was shocked and shocked. Vona couldn't believe that her daughter had the power to get lost. Ale Rosumila, what can happen? It's true that Aji Lure hasn't worn a beautiful outfit for a long time, and she herself has become boring. Letty also became embarrassed. As she brought another cup of warm tea, she thought that she would pay for the heavy dress and dress him. But the table was not as beautiful as I wanted. Lure unleashed her fury on the little Donka. She painted an angel wearing a horse mask. The girl confirmed that he is very dirty and does not show his hairy, incredible beauty. Letty also said that through her hairy confusion the angel cannot speak to others without a mask. That's what the Yangle with horns painted. Elifie. He's also a bitch, and yesterday the child was sleeping with him. Lure was amazed that the children dreamed of these archangels of the god Finis. Letty also said that she dreamed of the angel Pelistella and said that her mother was unreasonable. The woman became even more bloated and drank her daughter too much. So what can I say about the sisters? And she said with a grin that Mom has nothing to boast about because she respects her genius. Lure marveled at the daughter and thought about those who knew each other, the archangels of Finis. There is a lot to say about them, but no one can remember the details. Vona marveled at Donka and marveled that she had such a rich imagination. The child was truly intelligent. Letty was called Wrapped by the Gulyats. It was her friend Nana and the girl who quickly lost everything and ran to her. Before that, she asked her mother for permission, put a cup of tea on the table and said that she would turn back before 5 in the evening. Lure asked her daughter to wear just enough, so that unknown people would come before her and not run far. The woman marveled that her child was so active and was able to make friends without regard for those who spent the entire hour with her. Even before that, she always acts in her own way and doesn't listen to anyone. Miss Rose, Lure sensed. Baron Camnel was the greatest person that a woman could meet today. It was already too late to show dissatisfaction. The man turned around and denounced Lure, saying that their axes are as beautiful as emeralds. Vona asked him to drink. I chuckled when I was alone in Lure's house and looked at the police with various badges and bottles. Lure confirmed that Father and Will had gone to work, so she was alone. The guest deserved this. You need to wait until you apply it and remove the droplet. The woman did not deserve to be blooming at the house, otherwise the Lord. She took the product into her hands and lovingly drank it as a meta-visit of the guest before her. That hope that you don't need any kind of drive. You just wanted to get along with the beautiful Lure. She couldn't do it anymore and began to tear up. Camnel said that it's turbulent that the woman spends her time at the store. And I don't even want to give her a hint. The man said that he doesn't like women with children. She's so beautiful and she's so swayed that she's ready to make friends. We don't understand how we can manage life with William Osborne. And having spoken much more beautifully. The woman was shocked by this proposition. Tim even said that he wanted to feed the man Lure to the sharks. There seemed to be some kind of absurdity. Lure loudly confirmed that William was a kind man. The Baron's Prote did not control and did not want anything. No more than a replacement for your father, said Camnel. Prote Lure said that she was satisfied with her life as a commoner and would not ask for anything less. The Baron stood up and made a loud noise on the table. Vin called Lure a fool, taking your drops and rinsing the remainder. You will be amazed at how hard it is to wash. Stepping on the threshold, saying that the chance, Lure Obovyaskova will regret about the power of words and position. Father and man Lure appeared suddenly. They carried the products in their hands, having treated the Baron, and clucked affectionately at the one before them on the right. That little girl passed away without achieving anything. That's why it was explained to Rose and Lure. Vona changed her hair color and color to brown after she arrived on the island. Aji could have saved her daughter for herself that way. Will chuckled at the feelings of his friends and drank and did not harm them, the Baron. Vaughn confirmed that everything was fine. You are happy that everything is fine with Kahana. If he asked her not to go anywhere on her own, but if she had someone else to guide her, she would take over for her. Vaughn confirmed that there are many problems. I felt sorry for my worries. William was a very good person and swore about her. You might be willing to play the role of this person in order to find out the truth about Lure. She was really in love with him, and thought that she didn't deserve his kindness. Rose began to ask the man what they had bought, and what they were having for dinner. The woman behaved like a child and it made everyone laugh. Prote Dad was seriously angry at her. Vin Mauve is more important than food. Rose looked at him with a puzzled expression and checked the details. Apparently people from the capital came to this place. At that hour, little Letty was playing blindfolded. Vona was thinking about where to take it. I ran through the streets and looked around for needs, but nothing came to mind. Prote, I think she still knew the ones she was joking about. And she marveled at her find. There was a field with very beautiful purple flowers. The girl began to snort and realized that she had to show her beautiful cheeks to her mother. Vona picked up a beautiful bouquet and hurried home. Her eyes began to shine. She could see how well her mother was and how welcome she would be. Soon the girl got together with some guy. Vona fell sharply. The child injured her hand and did not understand what to do. The child's eyes lit up. Vona exchanged glances with the man. It was so wonderful for someone it's just like that. The little girl didn't understand what was going on. Letty marveled at the unknown man and thought about how sick he had been for an hour. It seems that she doesn't match her outward appearance. She fed on a man who was not ill for some time. Yoga was so well fed. The Prote girl wrapped her hair in the sweat. Vona explained that the man looked nasty. And truth. Calyx looked tired and greedy. Then she expressed her help. She could bring him to the doctor. The Duke laughed and gently touched her face. The light hair rose from his forehead and looked at the child's emerald eyes. The stench was very familiar. I know who has this color of eyes. Beautiful tableware. Letty did not understand the actions of the unknown man. Having asked about how many fates there are, the miscarriage of lure, which flowed from this new fate, was lost in my head. The girl confirmed that she was still 5. It will be 6 tomorrow. According to Calyx, the drink began to drain. He tensed up, and dear Letty kept talking. Vona happily talked about the fact that tomorrow was her national day. He will grow up 6 times and will be an adult. Calyx believes that there is radium. The little girl whined that it was his fault to praise her more. She doesn't realize that she's on the hook. Letty screamed that he was a fool, and even if he could praise him for that. Allah did not kill this, and it was lost. The man became tense and amazed at the little girl's courage and behavior. He decided to quickly straighten their cramps and gently stroke the girl's head, and said that he had no skin in such a situation and well done. Datina said that she could buy from 1 to 1,000 and she thought it was brilliant. Calyx watched her for a while. You have asked who is alive in this area and where your father is. Even the child was walking on her own and she was already shouting hello. Protletta had no idea why he was asking her that. It was not worthy and cried out to suspicion. Vona folded her hands one on the other and looked critically at the man. Letty suggested that since his uncle wanted to know everything about her, he would immediately introduce himself. Even her mother began to teach her not to talk to strangers, and this is even more amazing. This man looked sick and Letty decided to help him. Calyx said that she was very kind, and would still like to give her name if she realized that it was not good enough to tell the truth. He told him that his name was Carrot. The girl marveled at the man's high posture and marveled. It was a wonderful thing and my eyes sunk with sadness. Something about this person made me sick. Datina began to laugh at him. I was surprised, even though I had never spoken to children for such a long time before and didn't know the specifics of their behavior. Having lost the laughter of the child, he tried to take it into his hands. Having asked what her father's name was, Letty was already able to say her own name. The stranger's words brought the girl back to reality. Vaughn thought that this person had taken up his task again and did not understand why he needed such information. She said that her mother called her Letitia, which also means joy, and that the girl was written in a terrible way. She quickly named her fathers, Rose and William Osborne. The unknown person was fed by how many mothers of the girls of fate? Vaughn fed the Znova. For what purpose do you belong to the nobility? The man, becoming a girl, is becoming more and more suspicious. Letty interrupted the conversation and decided to go get out. Vona said that it was unacceptable for her to talk to her uncle. Prote Vin with a loud gurgle and seal, stretching out your hand to kiss the child. The little girl showed him where the doctor was located, wished him success and quickly ran off. Calyx thought whether to follow her or lose his place. And at that hour, behind his back, he was buzzing. No, we've already learned enough, said the woman at the dark coat with short black hair and turquoise eyes. Fawn also said that she was counting on Calyx to know who she was looking for. Vindoviv, you will definitely know. AJ sings, it's definitely close. I've been fooling around for so long and I can't stop now. Unfortunately, if you have to sell your soul to the devil, you will find it. There was light shining in the mat on the birch of the sea. Night fell on the street, covering the roads of the place for a month. Rose put her sleep into bed and thought about those that she was really tired of. In other words, the day has just begun and then ended. Moreover, she was surprised that her daughter was also tired, and she could have run into it like that. The child's story about the sick, handsome man made the woman happy. She didn't understand who was talking to her child and what was needed. People from the capital began to live on their islands. It was a rotten novelty. People have long been talking about how the Duke of Rochester increased the price of the world because of some important business. For the rest of the time, they became a little quiet. But now, If we talk about the guests in the place, it's restless. But the world only talked about the work of the goddess in the capital. There was nothing else there. However, Lur knew nothing about Calix's friendship with the goddess, and it was wonderful. The woman sat there and thought about what all this could mean. Nothing made sense to her. Since the Duke truly became friends, having fun with the goddess is a historical event, and everyone in the Empire was talking about her guilt. If nothing like this ever happened, what could it mean? Lur turned her gaze to the lamp. Traders in the capital knew nothing about fun, so it never happened. Fawn didn't understand how to get involved, and the two of them were one into one. What happened between them? Everything was so wonderful. The woman's body tensed. Vaughn still didn't understand anything. There was a hint of irrationality in his eyes. Letty's rapt at the village said the angel's word. This resulted from the thoughts of her mother. Vaughn thought that it was really a copy. And even in my dreams, things don't behave calmly. The child turned over from side to side. Lure continued to think. She thought that she should forget about Calix and her life. Don't worry about it. All their worlds were longing for this beautiful summer. Too much of it was overcooked and too much of it was wriggling. Fawn kissed the girl on the forehead. That was the only sense of life. The anniversary has broken through. Mom welcomed her child to this saint. Tomorrow will be a wonderful day for them. Darkness had already fallen on the place. All the booths stood in the dark. There was only light shining in front of the lighthouse. The bell rang on the door to the next room. Before the placement there are Zyshov. The young lad, having kissed his lips at such a late hour, needs to be taken to his mortgage. Sebula Lure. She came to pick up a gift for Donka while she was sleeping. The boy grinned. Alla asked to Zachakat Lure Kilka Havilin. She didn't mind anything at all. She protested that she had made a request for a gift this past year and has not yet arrived. Aloha. The lad began to sing that the gift would be perfect. Lure marveled at the wealth that was burning in the stones. Vaughn said that it's very warm here. It was a wonderful day when it was spring outside and it was so cold. She wanted to get home as soon as possible. There is still a long way to go before the adoption of the Uvishov. Lure quickly turned her head towards the door. Lisa stood in front of her with a powerful face, a woman with short black hair and wonderful energy. The girl with short green hair smiles evilly and says, "Ah, it's Rose, the thief of men's hearts and the destroyer of other people's lives, who appeared out of nowhere and also with an unknown child under her heart." Lure purses her lips and widens her already large green eyes. It seems that she is not at all happy to meet this brat. The green-haired girl standing in the doorway of the room and staring at Lure is Lucy, Harold's daughter. She hates dark hair more than anyone else in this town. At every meeting, Lucy tries to humiliate and insult the green-eyed. Lure folds his hands together, raises his eyebrows and says to the girl, "I don't understand what you're talking about. Letitia is Will's daughter." Lucy leans against the jam and makes a face of hatred. She angrily spits out, "No shame, no conscience. Let poor Will go free at last." Then the girl flashes her eyes and adds that Lure was still going to become the Baron's mistress. Green-eyed is shocked by these words. She doesn't understand why Lucy thinks that. Of course, the Baron often visits Lure. This cannot be denied. But the girl never liked him. Green-eyed is starting to get angry. But after a second, Lure pulls herself together, sighs dramatically, and replies to Lucy, "How hard it is to be popular. Even Baron Keimnel was affected by my charm." Green-Eye puts her hand to her chest and, looking Lucy straight in the eye, adds emphatically that her husband is William, and she has no intention of becoming the Baron's mistress, no matter how good a man he is. Lucy grits her teeth in anger and blurts out, "How you annoy me. All girls like you sooner or later cheat on their husbands. I'll tell Will about it." The green-haired man turns and walks away. Lure continues to stand still. The girl is a little confused by the spectacle that Lucy just put on. Green-eyed closes her eyes and wearily says to herself, "Looks like rumors about me will start spreading again. How tired of all this." The girl looks at the burning wood in the fireplace and gradually calms down. She convinces herself that everything will get better over time, so she shouldn't worry so much. The creak of the door is heard. A green-haired boy enters. He stands behind the counter and smiling sweetly turns to Lure. "And here I am. Sorry to keep you waiting." The girl tells the man that nothing terrible has happened. The green-haired one hands Lure a blue box tied with a yellow ribbon. He says it's a gift for Letizia. The boy also asks the girl to convey his greetings to the little birthday girl. Lure looks at the box enthusiastically and thanks the young man. She is very satisfied with his work. Green Eye clutches the package to his chest and says to himself, I hope Letty likes it. Night. The earth is illuminated by the moon. There is no one on the street, which makes one feel a little uncomfortable. Lure walks through the empty blocks, slightly hunched over. The girl was very cold. Green-eyed remembers her daughter, smiles sweetly and mentally addresses her. Letty, Mommy has a good present for you. You will be delighted. Suddenly, all the streetlights suddenly go out. Lure freezes in place and looks ahead. The girl was not jokingly frightened by this unexpected darkness. She looks at the lanterns, trying to find at least one working one. But there is no such thing. Green Eye says quietly, Are all the lights out? It's strange. How to be now? If you go the other way, you'll get a hook. And then Lure notices a blurred black figure not far from her. The figure smokes and hisses loudly and menacingly. The girl opens her eyes wide from fear. A mysterious figure approaches her. Lure realizes that this is not a person, but some strange creature, perhaps a monster. It looks somewhat like a skeleton, with 4 white eyes and an elongated head. Green Eye clutches the gift for Letizia tighter to her chest and leans back. The girl tries to calm herself down, but the closer the figure gets to her, the more nervous she becomes. When the creature is within a few steps of Lure, the green-eyed one decides to run away. But there is a problem. The girl's legs froze with fear and now she cannot move. Meanwhile, the black figure is already leaning towards the face of the green-eyed one. The girl trembles. Eyes appear in her eyes. It seems to Lure that it is already the end. She squints and turns her head somewhere to the side, trying not to look at the monster. It seems that now Lure will die tragically from the clutches of the black creature, and no one will find her here. But something happens that the green-eyed woman did not expect. A blond man with a sword appears between her and the figure. The monster immediately dissolves into the air, leaving only puffs of black smoke as a reminder. The man, without turning his face to Lure, carefully puts his heavy sword in its leather sheath. The girl looks at the broad back of the stranger and thinks, Did he come to protect me? After a few seconds, a man calls out, What are you doing here? Lure's eyes widen in surprise. This voice seems very familiar to her. Concerned by the long absence of an answer from the girl, the fair-haired man turns to her and asks, Are you okay? Lure releases a gift for his beloved daughter from his hands. The box hits the cobblestones with a characteristic sound. In the head of the green-eyed girl, thoughts are spinning. There can be no mistake. Even after 7 years of living here, I couldn't forget that voice. The man blinks and repeats his question a little louder. I asked if you were okay. Why are you silent? In the moonlight, the fair-haired man looks rather ominous. Lure realizes that in front of her is none other than Calix, the man from whom she once ran away. The girl lowers her head, hoping that the man did not notice her face. Then the green-eyed man turns sharply to the side. She thinks of a plan to escape, because it can be dangerous to stay with Calix for a long time. After a few seconds, Lure jumps up and runs forward. Runs without looking back. Despite the surprised exclamation of the fair-haired one, runs faster than ever. At the same time, the girl thinks why Calix came to this god-forsaken city. Was he looking for her? Lure thought she would never see this man again. 8 years have passed. Green-eyed is most interested in Calix's relationship with Saya. Why isn't he in her arms now? Does he still love Lure? The girl turns a corner and stops near a building. Green-Eye is trying to catch his breath after a quick run. Tears appear in her eyes. The girl beats herself in the chest, clenches her teeth, and mentally says, No, I must not think of Calix and his love. I don't want to be Lure Clay anymore. After a while, the green-eyed man calms down a bit and starts to think more rationally. First of all, the girl is worried that Calix could see her face. Lure pulls his hat over his eyes and says seriously, We must flee the city. Green-eyed house. There is a large bag on the floor, filled to the brim with things. Lure tries to shut her down. The girl does not stop thinking about Calix. I never thought that he would come to this city to find me. How did he even think of this? Lure finally manages to zip up the bag. Yes, perhaps such luggage will be difficult to carry, but it is not very important. All the same, the girl is not going on a long journey. You can't run far with a small child in your arms. Therefore, mother and daughter will have to go to the nearest city, Balrog. Green-eyed decides to wait there for Alice, who, if anything, can help, and then think about what to do next. Lure approaches Letitia's bed and gently says to the child, "Letty, it's time to wake up. We're going on a trip." The girl sits down on the bed and asks in a sleepy tone, "Where to?" Green Eye replies that they will go to the Balrog first. Letty, who has already been to that city, happily says, "There is a beach with pebbles. Shall we go there again when we see Aunt Alice?" Lure immediately agrees, changes her daughter into a light yellow dress, then picks her up in her arms and goes down the stairs. Already in the hallway, the girl mentions that she needs to warn Will about their sudden departure. Suddenly, Lure hears Calix's voice. She said her last name is Osbon. Are you ready to take responsibility for her words? The girl opens her eyes wide from surprise and fright. On the threshold of the house, she sees two servants and her ex-fiancé. The servants confirm that the girl Calix saved tonight is indeed Osborne. They also ask the fair-haired man who he is. It seems that the man did not like this question. He purses his lips and coldly replies, "You better not know." Meanwhile, Lure thinks about what to do. The girl dares to try to slip outside through another exit. She quietly paces around the dinner table, mentally promising herself to contact Will a little later. There are a few steps to the door when suddenly Lure's heel knocks too loudly on the wooden floor. The girl freezes in place and turns her head towards Calix, praying that he will not pay attention to the noise. But unfortunately, the situation is not in favor of the girl. Calix turns his gaze to Lure. She mentally berates herself for being careless. The fair-haired man's expression changes from slightly annoyed to shocked. The man opens his mouth and says quietly, "Lure, even after 7 years of separation, the fair-haired man recognized the girl." Lure does not take her eyes off her husband and hugs Letty tighter. A man is about to approach a dazed girl. Lure's eyes widen in fear. She doesn't know what to do, but she realizes that standing still and waiting for Calix to grab her isn't the best option. The girl decides to run away, no matter how painful it is for her to leave the boy. Lure makes his way to the door with the child in his arms. Meanwhile, one of the servants holds the fair-haired man by the shoulders so that he does not rush after the green-eyed man. The girl runs out of the house and gradually disappears into the darkness. Calix, not worrying about the sleep of the locals, loudly shouts, "Lure! Where are you going?" After some time, the green-eyed man finds himself in the forest. She puts her daughter on the ground and tries to regain consciousness after running. Little Letty is worried about her mother's condition. The girl asks, "Are you okay?" Lure hurries to reassure the child. "Everything is fine, now I will regain my breath." Letty puts a finger to her chin and ponders. "That's strange. How does Uncle Carrot know Mom's real name?" Lure is about to explain something to her daughter, but suddenly she hears someone's footsteps. A man approaches the mother and child with a bottle in his hands. He asks Green-Eyed where she is going so late, "But also with my daughter." Letty is afraid of a stranger, so she clings to Lure. Then the man, who doesn't look very sober, throws up his arms and says, "Decided to finally run away from that asshole Osbon, huh?" Green-Eyed strokes his daughter's blonde hair, makes a menacing expression on his face and tells the drunkard not to approach him, otherwise he will have an overflow. The man is angered by the girl's rude tone. He grits his teeth and snarls, "I was so kind to you, and you turn out to be an ungrateful creature." Then the drunkard reaches out to Lure, intending to harm her. But he does not have time to carry out his evil intentions. The man is hit in the face by some blue magic. This is the handiwork of Alice, the green-eyed friend. The girl belligerently directs the magic shield in the direction of the drunkard and asks Lure how she is. The man immediately runs away. Alice kneels down next to her friend and somewhat indignantly addresses her. "What are you doing here so late?" Lure grabs the redhead's hands and says that Calix came after her, so she has to run from here. Alice thoughtfully says, "That's how. So he found you after all. Are you sure you should have run away from him? Perhaps there was a misunderstanding between you." Lure mentions the plot of the novel she lives by and tells Alice that she cannot tell her the whole truth. The girl begins to tremble. Tears appear in her eyes. Lure adds quietly, "Even after 7 years, it still scares me to think about it. I know that if I meet Calix, something terrible will happen." Alice sees her friend's condition and tries to calm her down. "Lure, it's too late and it's very cold outside. We need somewhere to spend the night." The girl lowers her head and answers that she wanted to go to the Balrog. Alice jumps up, puts her hand forward and says firmly that she will find the wagon now. She then orders Lure to wait for her here and runs towards the city. Letizia hugs her mother, who says, "Letty is still very young, so she can't do anything." Surprisingly, the girl is not offended, but on the contrary, agrees with her and is glad that Aunt Alice came to their aid. Lure is touched by her daughter's maturity. Green Eye looks at her daughter tenderly and says to herself that Letty is a very smart girl, so she doesn't often worry about her. The girl opens her green eyes wide, like her mother's, grabs the girl by the dress and says, "Mom, the angel said that today I will be able to see my dad, and he also advised me to be careful." After this conversation, mother and daughter do not notice that Alice has already returned, and not alone, but as promised, with a wagon. The redhead waves Lure and Letty and calls them to her. Green-Eyed offers his daughter to talk already in the carriage. The girl agrees. Lure and Letty approach the carriage. The girl puts the child inside. In a second, the green-eyed Alice and Letitia are already sitting in the carriage and waiting for it to move. The coachman whips the horses on their backs, but for some reason the animals refuse to go. The man does not understand what happened. Suddenly, a powerful magic beam cuts the reins. Lure looks out from the carriage and his eyes widen when he sees this picture. Horses run in an unknown direction. The coachman, who was not jokingly frightened by magic of unknown origin, shouts, "Save!" and jumps up. Lure tries to stop the man by calling him, but he no longer hears. Confused, Lure thinks about what to do next. Where to find another coachman, what to tell Letty, and most importantly, how to protect her child. And then the girl hears Calix's voice. "Lure!" Green-Eyed freezes in place. Still, Calix caught her. Alice gets out of the carriage. She flinches at the sight of Calix. The man turns his gaze to her and mockingly asks, "Or is that your merit, witch?" Lure realizes that Calix won't let go of them so easily, so he decides to talk to it. She orders Alice to look after Letty. The red-haired girl carefully holds the blonde girl close to her and goes somewhere. The man and the green-eyed man remain alone. Calix pats the girl behind the ear. Ta looks at the fair-haired man in shock. The man quietly asks Lure who let her run away. The girl begins to feel guilty for wanting to leave the city and piteously utters, "Calix." The man does not pay attention to what the girl said. He says thoughtfully, "7 years have passed." Then he leans too close to Lure's face and, drilling the green-eyed gaze with blue eyes, asks her, "Are you sure this isn't a dream? Give me the answer to me. Is that really you, Lure?" The girl squints, not being able to decide whether she likes Calix's touch or not. The man breathes directly into her face. Green-Eye quietly replies, "Yes, it's me." The fair-haired one moves away from her a little and asks the girl if she is the real Lure. Green-Eyed is silent. Tears begin to flow from the man's eyes. He lowers his eyes to the ground and, with a hint of resentment and drama in his voice, addresses Lure. "Why? Why did you leave me?" A man plunges into memories of 7 years ago. When Lure ran away, he wanted to die, but then he pulled himself together and vowed to live until he found her. On that fateful day, Calix tried to understand why the girl left him. He remembered how she cried and shouted in his face, "And live well with her." Calix stared at the floor for hours and thought, "Has Lure decided that I have a mistress? Where did she get it from? Who made her think that?" The fair-haired man thought about this question until he saw in the reports that his beloved Lure was visiting the imperial palace. It was the day the goddess came. It was then that the green-eyed woman decided to leave the capital. One of the maids said, "She looked puzzled when I mentioned the arrival of the goddess. I understand that this is not a common occurrence, but the lady's reaction was, how can I say it? Weird." It seemed to Calix that he had missed some very important moment in their relationship, but he didn't even understand what exactly prompted him to this thought. The only thing that the fair-haired man knew for almost 100% was that the goddess Lure was to blame for her escape. Calix was sad without the girl for a long time, and saw her image everywhere. The blonde couldn't understand why the green-eyed one doubted him. Did he do something wrong? During his visions with Lure, Calix often spoke to her. He tried to prove to the girl that only she deserves his love, that he is ready to do anything for her. And it seemed the green-eyed woman was listening attentively, but as soon as the man tried to touch the girl with his hand, she began to laugh merrily and move away from him. Calix tried to catch up with her, said that he was suffering a lot, that he could not live like this, but Lure did not hear him. She moved further and further away until she finally dissolved into the air. At such moments, the man looked into the void, pulled a crazy smile on his face, and repeated many times, Please come back. These dreams were the only joy in life for Calix. He hated waking up. Reality without Lure seemed to him simply terrible. The fair-haired man was indifferent to his wealth, a luxurious estate, and other benefits. After waking up, Calix always screamed out of resentment at the world, at Green Eye, and at himself. One morning, a girl with blue hair heard screams from her husband's room and decided to check if he was okay. Calix clenched his black shirt with his white, anger-whitened fingers, and through tightly clenched teeth uttered something strange and incomprehensible. Then he cast an angry look at the bed and uttered, "Lure!" The girl flashed her eyes and advised the blonde to simply forget about this irresponsible and heartless fugitive. Calix looked miserable. During Lure's absence, the man lost a lot of weight, and black bags appeared under his eyes. The blue-haired woman did not understand why Calix was suffering so much. Why doesn't he cut Lure out of his life? But the girl did not interrogate the young man. After all, his feelings are none of her business. She took out a letter with a red seal from her bosom and handed it to the barrister. The man was not very happy and indifferently asked the blue-haired man, "What kind of letter?" The girl replied, "Look at the addressee, Your Grace." Calix did so. His eyes widened in shock. On the white paper in neat handwriting was written, "Postal District of Canelo, half the island of Jula." The fair-haired one crumpled the letter, furrowed his eyebrows, directed his gaze to the door and said to the girl in a firm tone, "We must go there." After a second, he added, "We have to get to this town as soon as possible." The blue-haired girl was unhappy with Calix's decision, but she did not dare to listen to him. She bowed to her husband and left the room. The blonde put one hand on the table and turned to Lure's image in his mind. "Please wait for me. We will meet very soon." Then he pushed so hard on the glass window that it cracked. Blood flowed from the man's palm, but he did not pay attention to it. Calix smiled sinisterly and said he wouldn't let Lure escape again when he found her. The man comes back to reality. He grabs the girl by the shoulders without taking his eyes off her and asks confusedly, "Lure, why? Why did you leave me?" Green-eyed doesn't know what to say to Calix. The man continues to say to his ex-fiancée, "Did you think I would cheat on you?" The blonde narrows his eyes and asks the girl another question. "Did you run away because you didn't trust me?" Lure lowers his eyes to the ground and makes a timid attempt to break free from the boy's arms. She doesn't want to tell Calix now. It's all very complicated and confusing, but the man is not going to let her go. He shouts, "Explain everything to me. Explain so that I finally understand why you left me." Lure is moved by the boy's words. She starts to cry. The girl closes her eyes, trying to hide untimely tears, and tells Calix that even if she wanted to return to him, it is already impossible. Lure suddenly remembers the day when Calix, grieving the death of his parents, came to her and asked only one thing, to be by his side. His request was sincere. The blonde lost people close to him, so he really needed support. Calix then stretched out his hands to his bride and added, "Don't leave me." The girl, although she promised herself to be cold with her fiancé, could not hold back and threw herself into his arms. Lure emerges from her memories, rustles her dress on the cobblestones, and utters a single word, "I'm sorry." It seems to the girl that she is very guilty of Calix. Green-eyed made a mistake a long time ago, 7 years ago, when she fell in love with Calix without memory, realizing that she shouldn't do that, and then simply betrayed him. Her running away with Alice, who had always supported her, was a dastardly act. The girl, who is already sobbing, raises her hand to her chest and begs Calix to forgive her. She wanted to avoid her unfortunate fate with all her might, but at the same time she dreamed of being loved by her fiancé. But it seems the fair-haired man is not touched by the girl's words. He takes a step towards her and says, "Excuse me? Seriously? 7 years. I suffered for 7 whole years. Do you think a simple 'I'm sorry' will ease my suffering?" The man touches Lure's brown locks and asks her, "Besides, what have you done to your hair? I loved your old color so much." The blonde brings a lock of the girl's hair to his face, squints his eyes, and somehow ominously says, "We have to turn everything back, and your hair." Lure begins to be alarmed by the man's behavior, but he does not stop saying, "And our fate. We will return to the capital and get married." The blonde smiles and, as if in some delirium, begins to describe their future wedding. He says they will make the best wedding dress for his bride and order a platinum tiara. Terrified, Lure becomes hysterical. She pushes the man away from her and repeats, "Stop, stop, stop, Calixis." The fair-haired man is surprised by the bride's reaction. The man thought she would be happy. After some time, the girl calms down and says, "I have a daughter, Calix, and even a husband." Calix's expression turns ominous. The blonde blinks his eyes and answers Lure, "I know perfectly well about that." The dark-haired man opens his eyes wide in surprise. How does a man know that she has a family? Calix pats the girl's cheek with her finger and says that she will raise their daughter with love. "As for the man," continues the fair-haired man, "did he touch you with his hands?" Calix grips a lock of Lure's hair tightly and angrily says that if that's the case, he'll have to cut it off. Or kill him. There is definitely something wrong with the blonde. His blue eyes are burning with anger. The girl grabs the man's hands and shouts in his face, "Calix, are you completely out of your mind? What are you saying? Are you scaring me?" The blonde purses his lips and silently hugs Lure to him. The girl's hand is illuminated by a bright green glow. Calix seems to have done something to her. Lure looks at her wrist and notices a beautiful gold bracelet with 3 green gems on it. The dark-haired one is even more frightened. She asks Calix, "What is this?" The girl looks at the biggest magic stone on the bracelet for a few seconds. Lure wants to take a step back, but she can't. The girl cannot move. The magic stone constrains her movements. Does Calix really want to take the dark-haired man with him? The man gently pats the girl on the head and says that this bracelet is a gift for her. The blonde leans his cheek against Lure's soft hair. Then he raises the girl's hand to his face and whispers, "You have no idea how happy I am." Suddenly the man starts laughing. He squints and holding Lure says, "I think my heart is about to jump out of my chest." The girl looks at the fair-haired man with wide-open eyes. She understands that something is wrong with Calix. The look in his blue eyes, his strange behavior, mood swings. All this seems very strange to Lure. The man smiles evilly and asks Lure scathingly, "Did you think I would stay sane after you left me?" Then the fair-haired man leans so close to the girl that he almost touches the tip of her nose with his. The man narrows his eyes and says that he understands everything. Lure was also not easy. After all, she loves him. Calix stares at the girl coldly and adds that during these 7 years he has realized one important thing. He was not for the green-eyed man whom she could trust. But now the man is going to fix everything. He easily lifts the dazed girl in his arms and tells her that he will definitely prove his reliability. This idyll is interrupted by Alice, who got out of the carriage to check if her friend is okay. She sees that the girl is too obediently sitting on Calix's arms. The redhead yells, "What did you do to Lure? It's because of you that she doesn't move, right?" The man throws an angry look at the witch and orders her to shut up. He also says that Alice would have been dead a long time ago if it weren't for the fact that she sent the letter with Lure's location. Green-eyed looks at her friend, trying to figure out which letter she is talking about. Is it all Alice's fault? It was because of her that Calix was able to find a girl after these 7 years of separation. The redhead nervously bites her lips and says that she could not do otherwise. However, she will not allow the mad Calix to take Lure by force. The man says nonchalantly, "If you really care about Lure's fate, get out of my sight." Suddenly, Calix notices daughter Lure, who is hugging the redhead tightly, and says that she has one thing for this girl, so she will also take her with her. Letty turns her head towards the man and looks at him with frightened eyes. Lure is shocked by Calix's words. What business can a grown man have with a 6-year-old child? Most likely the fair-haired man realized that little Letty was his daughter. The girl opens her eyes wide in horror. Now he will try to take from Lure her only treasure, her child. Terrible pictures of Calix taking little Letty appear in the girl's imagination. The dark-haired woman begins to shake wildly and whisper, "No, please, not Letitia." Calix notices the girl's condition and asks her in surprise what happened. But Lure does not have time to answer. Alice, who listened to Calix and never got out of here, utters some kind of spell. Elk Ventus Wine Train. The blonde casts an angry look at his ex-fiancée's friend. Before he has time to blink, Lure is in Alice's arms. The redhead holds the girl tightly to her. Lure asks her friend where Letitia is. The girl smiles and says that the green-eyed man has nothing to worry about. Her young daughter is safe. Someone's cry is heard from the side of the city. "Kiaya!" Calix, Alice, and Lure immediately fall silent. Suddenly, his assistant runs up to the fair-haired man. She informs her master about the attack on Canelo. The man questions her. "What?" The blue-haired one blinks his eyes and begins to explain the details. "Monsters have appeared in the town. City security right now. But the girl does not have time to finish. A black monster with red eyes, similar to a giant cobra, appears near Alice and Lure. The girls scream in terror. Some time passes. Lure opens her big green eyes and says to herself, "Huh?" It seems that the girl does not understand what is happening now. She is in some kind of abyss. The girl puts her hands to the sides. There are many questions in her head. Where am I? What's wrong with me? Why can't I feel anything? She hears someone's voice coming from far away. The girl is very cold. She still can't move. Is her life over? Is she dead? But how so? Lure, although she was a criminal in the plot of the novel, tried with all her might to avoid her tragic fate. She ran as far as she could, but in the end she will die anyway. Lure clenches his teeth in resentment. She closes her eyes and starts to cry. If the girl had known that things would turn out like this, she would definitely have spoken to Calix. Lure looks at the bracelet on her hand and thinks, I guess Alice was right. There was a little misunderstanding between us. I should have just told him about it instead of running away like a coward. The voice that belongs to Calix again reaches the girl. Lure, come on, Lure, please. Thanks to this voice, the girl returns to reality. She slowly opens her eyes. Calix sees this and shouts, Lure, have you come to your senses? The fair-haired man's face is excited and annoyed at the same time. The man is almost crying. He was very scared for Lure. The girl raises her head and looks around. She quietly addresses Calix. Letitia, where is my daughter? What happened to her? Calix, who has been kneeling all this while holding Lure in his arms, replies, Don't worry. The witch said she's in a safe place. The dark-haired one sighs in relief and says, Good then. Tears begin to flow from Calix's eyes. The man was very tired of all this. He sobs and shyly turns to the girl. Forgive me, Lure. The girl looks at the boy in surprise, not understanding what he is talking about. Calix explains, You were right. I was out of my mind. I foolishly put that bracelet on you and put you in such danger. It would kill even me. The man, who now looks a bit miserable, adds that these 7 years of separation were pure hell for him. If something had happened to Lure, he would not have survived it. The blonde's words move the girl. She hugs him tenderly and whispers soothingly, Calixus. The man digs into Lure's hair. The idol is disturbed by a bright red-blue glow and someone's hissing. They seem to be monsters. Lursha's eyes widen in horror. She still hasn't moved on from her previous encounter with the monster. Calix releases the girl from his arms and takes out a dagger from his bosom. The man groups himself, preparing to leap from his seat at any moment and attack the monster. He also orders Lure not to leave him. The girl cannot say a word because of fear. She sees a tall black creature in the distance, shrouded in smoke. The dark-haired one thinks, What is this? The creature is not human-like. She has thin, long legs, a body devoid of ribs, hands like ribbons, and instead of eyes and a nose, a large yellow hole. Calix covers the dark-haired man with his hand and drills the monster with a cold gaze of blue eyes. The girl screams in fright. Calix! The fair-haired one cuts through the air with a dagger. His facial expression is very concentrated. His eyes are narrowed, his lips are compressed, his eyebrows are raised. He is ready to defend himself and Lure. The girl turns to her ex-fiancé. Are you okay? We need to flee immediately. I'm afraid. Don't risk it like that, please. Suddenly, Calix freezes in place, mouth agape and dagger down. The man notices another monster. It looks at the fair-haired man with an ugly yellow-red eye and opens its mouth, intending to swallow its victim. Then several more monsters appear. They surround Calix and Lure. The couple finds themselves in a treacherous trap of black soil. No one knows if they will be able to save themselves. The man understands that he and Lure have, frankly, not many chances of survival. However, he decides to fight to the end. Calix clutches the dagger in his hand and sternly says to the dark-haired woman, Don't leave me. One of the monsters hisses menacingly and swims too close to the dark-haired woman and the man. Lure begins to cry in fear. The girl quietly sobs and leans against the fair-haired man's shoulder. He hugs her with his arm and swings a dagger. Suddenly the monsters disappear. Calixa and Lure are blinded by a white glow. Dark-haired squints one eye and tries to understand what is happening. Saint, dressed in a dark gray dress, approaches the couple. The girl smiles sweetly and says to the fair-haired man, I'm glad that everything is fine with you, Calix. Lure looks at this blessed one and says to himself, Seiya? What did she forget here? The saint does not pay any attention to the dark-haired one. She examines the street affected by the monster attack. A broken fence, broken buildings, and glass. The girl then says to Calix, who is still hugging Lure, "It's a good thing you're not hurt." The dark-haired woman says to herself, "I knew it. She's here because of Calix." For 7 years, the fair-haired man and Saya had to live soul to soul. Saint knows something about Calix that Lure does not. But despite the plot of the novel, the fair-haired man is somehow not very happy to see Saya. He asks the girl unhappily, "What are you doing here?" Saya slightly tilts her head to the side and, smiling slyly, says, "Isn't it obvious? I saved you a few days ago. God told me that this city would be in danger." The man says with obvious sarcasm in his voice, "What a coincidence." He finds it a little strange that of all places the monsters attacked Callisto. Saint squints her eyes and smiles sweetly. Lure looks at Calix. She is shocked by the tension between him and Saya. Shouldn't they love each other? The dark-haired man thinks. Calix narrows her eyes and purses her lips. Saya scathingly responds to the man's attack. "And don't say, I was so excited when I found out that you were coming here." Calix looks down at the ground and in a serious tone reminds the saint that he asked her to stop following him everywhere. Such behavior is not a manifestation of care or love. It resembles ordinary stalking. The girl asks her husband, "What kind of bad opinion do you have about me? Don't you think there was a misunderstanding between us?" Lure keeps his eyes on Calix and tries to understand what happened between him and Saya. After all, their meeting took place properly, as it was in the novel. Why is Sveta completely indifferent to her husband? Meanwhile, Saya continues to argue with the blonde, "I'm just worried about you, Calix." The man is already fed up with this whole performance. He hugs Lure tighter, raises his eyebrows and orders Saya to shut up. Even if she dances naked in front of the blonde, he still won't love her. Lure realizes Calix despises Saint. Saya puts a hand to his cheek and looks at the fair-haired man with a look full of tenderness. Suddenly, a man approaches Calix, Lure, and Saint. He stops a few paces away from these three and angrily addresses the blonde. "How dare you say such things to a goddess?" The man's name is Brill. He has long blue hair and eyes of the same color. Brill is dressed in a long white cloak decorated with blue ribbons. The man notices that Lure has been silent all this time, tilts his head to the side and mockingly asks Saya, "Oh, is this the same toy?" Lure glares at the stranger. Calix narrows her eyes and angrily says to Brill, "What did you call her? Toy asterisk. Are you so eager to get to that world? If necessary, I would be happy to arrange that." The blue-haired one squints cutely, raises his hand up and apologizes to Calix. "Please forgive me. This noble maiden the Duke had been looking for 7 years? Is she your precious bride?" Saya decides to intervene in the dispute between the two men before the matter comes to a head. She touches Brill's chest with her hand and asks him to calm down. Then the girl turns to face Calix and Lure, and smiling sweetly says, "Don't take his words seriously. Brill just cares about me." Lure is a little alarmed by the words of the saint. She feels some insincerity in them. The dark-haired one purses his lips and looks at the ground. Calix, meanwhile, doesn't take his irritated gaze away from Brill. The fair-haired man's hand, in which he holds the dagger, begins to tremble. Lure decides to cheer up her fiancé. She carefully takes his palm in hers. Then the girl turns her gaze to Brill and Saint and coldly says, "Don't worry, you didn't offend anyone. All is well." The saint looks at Calix's ex-fiancé and says sarcastically, "What a smart girl." Saya's eyes are burning with hatred. She is jealous of the fair-haired Lure. Calix clucks in displeasure and turns away from Saint and Brill. Saya says, "Why don't we go back to the hotel and continue the conversation there?" The girl smiles widely and continues, "I heard that the local food is very tasty. Have you tasted it yet, Calixus?" This question annoys the man. When Saya, wanting to get at least some kind of response from the fair-haired man, touches his elbow with her hand, he rudely pushes her away. The man tells the goddess that he does not want to chat with her about various trifles. The black-haired woman's expression turns gloomy. Calix turns to his ex-fiancé. "Lure, aren't you hurt?" Then in front of Saya and Brill, he puts the green-eyed hand to his cheek. The goddess bites her lips. She is jealous of Lure. Suddenly, the night silence is broken by a thin child's voice. "Mom! Mom!" This is what little Letizia is shouting. She runs out from around the corner of some big house. When the girl sees Lure in Calix's arms, she freezes in place. After a few seconds, Letty looks at the fair-haired man with wide eyes and asks him to return her mother. Calix, who hasn't interacted with small children often until now, says confused, "Okay?" Letty asks what time is it. Lure waits for what her daughter will say next. The girl squints her eyes and continues, "It is now 11 hours and 50 minutes. A little more and I will be 6 years old." Dark-haired says that it is indeed so. Lure wonders what to do. In the commotion, she lost a present for Letty. How to congratulate your daughter now? Calix looks at the girl. Lure finds a way out of this not very pleasant situation. She offers her daughter to buy a present tomorrow. Fortunately, Letty immediately agrees. The dark-haired woman is glad that she has such an obedient child. She smiles sweetly and says to her daughter, "Letty, you are such a good girl. Well, an angel." Lure squeezes Letizia's cheeks. The girl looks at her mother with a somewhat strange look. Letty doesn't seem to have liked her mother's compliment very much. She tries to remove Lure's hands from her face and says, "Oh no, Letty is no angel." Saya, watching this picture, sighs and asks Calix, "And who is this little girl? Is it Lure's daughter?" The dark-haired man purses his lips and freezes in place. The girl was surprised that the goddess called her by name. It's a little strange because they've never met in person before. Lure strokes Letty's hair, trying to calm herself down a bit. The child hides behind its mother's skirt and looks angrily at Calix, Saya, and Brill. She doesn't really like these people. Lure offers her daughter to go to her room, but the girl is silent for some reason. It doesn't look like her at all. The dark-haired one worriedly asks the child, "Letty, what's wrong?" The goddess decides to intervene in the conversation between mother and daughter. She smiles at Letty and says she has nothing to fear anymore. Saya wants to touch the girl's hair, but she avoids it. Letitia tightens her grip on her mother's dress. Lure does not quite understand what frightened her dear daughter so much. Green-eyed asks again, turning to the child, "Letty?" Saya looks at the girl with a kind of evil look. She did not like that Letitia did not react to her at all, but less so. Now the black-haired man is much more interested in Calix. She grabs the man's elbow and asks if he is hungry. The man clenches his teeth, about to say something offensive to the goddess, but suddenly freezes in place. Calix lowers his eyes. He is very surprised by what he saw. Little Letty holds the man's leg and looks at him with her big green eyes. The girl says demandingly, "On the pens!" Calix smiles faintly. He understood what the girl wanted but still asked her, "What?" Lure says seriously, "Take me by the arms." The man asks, "Why?" The girl narrows her eyes and tells him to just do it. Lure looks at her daughter and smiles. She was surprised and at the same time amused by Letty's behavior. Meanwhile, the girl is already sitting on Calix's arms. She is very pleased, which is not the case with a man who looks puzzled. The goddess and assistant Calixus stand aside. Brill suggests that Saya return to the hotel. It seems to him that now is not the time to interfere in the personal affairs of the fair-haired man. Besides, it will start to dawn very soon. The goddess needs at least a little rest. Calix lifts Letty high up. The girl laughs merrily. Some time passes. Indeed, little by little it is beginning to dawn. The morning sun penetrates through the windows of some hotel or house. Lure, fresh from the bathroom, wipes her head with a towel, sighs tiredly and says, "It's been a long day." The girl looks at her legs and notices a large bruise on one of them. She could kill herself during an attack by monsters. Lure seems to stand out a lot. Green Eye leans his cheek against the towel and says, "I hope I can hide this horror with socks. If anyone sees this, rumors may spread that my husband is beating me." Lure enters the bedroom and freezes in place. Calix is sitting on her bed. He is dressed in a homely way, a roomy blue robe and slippers of the same color. The man looks intently at the girl. He shuffles his slipper on the floor, trying to get up. Lure doesn't know what to say. The girl is really shocked by the presence of Calix in her bedroom. Calix is already standing next to her. In the end, Lure collects her thoughts and asks the man in a soft tone, "What are you doing here?" Calix silently looks at the robe of the dark-haired woman. The girl tries to hide from Calix. It surprises him a little. The man asks her, "Why are you hiding your body?" Lure's expression turns innocent. She looks at the blonde with wide eyes and pretends not to understand what he is talking about. Calix carefully tries to explain. Aren't we close to you? We used to make love and you weren't ashamed to be a bit frank. Lure's mouth falls open in indignation. She tells her husband that all this is not true, and if it is true, it was a long time ago. Calix purses her lips and narrows her eyes. He didn't like the dark-haired woman's answer. But Calix decides not to say this to the girl's face, but to act gently. He gently tucks her hair behind her ear and says, Lure, if you only knew how I've been waiting for this day. Calix pulls a smug smile on her face and continues, For all 7 years of separation from you, I have never shared a bed with another woman. You are the only one who is worthy of this, so don't run away from me anymore. The man's face looks a little creepy, especially his sinister smile. Lure notices that something is wrong with Calix again. But what exactly? Dark-haired tries to understand, examining him from head to toe. Meanwhile, Calix says terrible things. If you listen to me and run away, I don't know what I can do with you. Sounds like a threat, but Lure does not pay attention to these words. She is more interested in the man's view. The look of a madman. That was the way the blonde looked at her that night as he mumbled something about a happy wedding and tried to pull on the magic bracelet. Lure looks into the man's blue eyes and asks herself, Did he become like this because of me? The blonde suddenly changes the subject. He asks the girl if she has an ointment for bruises. The man seems to have noticed Lure's slight injury. The girl calmly answers, No, don't worry, this bruise will go away on its own. Calixa was satisfied with such an answer. He takes a few steps away from Lure and offers her to go to bed. The girl puts her hands to her chest and asks in surprise, To the bed? The blonde snorts loudly and says, Calm down, I won't hurt you, I promise. Lure smiles sweetly, lowers her eyes to the floor and agrees to her husband's proposal. The man and the girl are already in the bedroom. Calix decided to take care of Lure's bruise, so now the blonde is sitting on the bed with her legs stretched out. The man warns the girl that it will hurt, and then begins to apply the ointment. Lure endures in silence, staring intently ahead. The man tries to distract her from the pain by talking. By the way, I already know everything. William Osmond told me about it. The man gets angry at the very mention of this person. Calix tells the girl exactly what he learned from Osmond. You are not married. William agreed to play the role of your husband to protect you and Letitia. Then the man adds, You dyed your luxurious hair and found yourself a fake husband. You did everything so that I wouldn't find you. The man uttered these words with sadness in his voice. Lure feels sorry for her ex-fiancé. She tries to contradict him. Calix, you are wrong. The girl does not have time to finish. The fair-haired man cuts her off mid-sentence. It doesn't matter. You are going to the capital with me. If you don't want to cause trouble for others, you better not get in the way. The man finishes bandaging Lure's injured leg and informs her about it. Calix stands up, turns his back to Lure, about to leave the room, and says, Good morning. We have to celebrate Letitia's birthday tomorrow. The girl is a little surprised by these words. Does Calix really care about their child? The man stops at the door and without turning around adds, Letitia is a wonderful girl, just like you. Lure freezes in place, eyes wide. Calix exits, slamming the door loudly. Lure looks towards the exit of the room and thinks about the behavior of the blonde. He found out about my relationship with William. The dark-haired woman sits on her narrow bed and looks at the floor. She wonders why Calix didn't ask Osmond who Letty's real father was. Maybe he has already guessed everything, and he realized that Letitia is his own daughter. It is not surprising if it is so, because Letty is very similar to the fair-haired one. But why does the man not love Saya so much? Why is he annoyed by this black-haired beauty who is ready to do anything for him? Has Lure's fate finally changed its course as the girl wished? Morning. At the Lure house, preparations for Letty's birthday are in full swing. There is a bowl of whipped egg whites and a packet of milk on the kitchen table. Lure prepares Tor for her little girl herself. Strawberry with pieces of chocolate as Letitia likes. The dark-haired one decorates it with cream. The girl, whose hair is always in a ponytail while cooking, takes a few steps away from the cake and examines her work. She seems pleased with the result. The cake turned out just great. Lure turns her head toward Alice and the guy she bought Letty's gift from and says, Thanks for helping me, and I'm sorry for distracting you from your work. The red-haired woman sits down on the bench, waves her hand and smiles cheerfully. Trifles, we are friends. Lure's friend adds, You did a great job, Lure. Letty will love it. Only the dark-haired one picks up the cake to take it into the hall, when Alice runs up and snatches it from her hands. Red-haired Lure says, "I'll do everything myself, don't worry." The girl thanks her friend for her help. Lure's friend and Alice are standing at the entrance to the little birthday girl's room. Alice is holding a cake, and the boy is holding a large box containing a present for Letty. Lure, who remained in the kitchen, runs her hand across the table and sighs sadly. The girl is thinking about her fate again. If she really has changed, then there is no point in her being here. The dark-haired woman rests her hands on the table. Although her heart tells her to go with Calix, she does not know what to do. Can Will and Sane, people close to Lure who have always been there for her, understand her? They so joyfully accepted her into their family. If she says she wants to go home, Will and his father will probably be upset. But Lure has no choice. The girl bites her lip. The dark-haired one looks at Calix, who is standing in the doorway of the kitchen. Now he thinks only about how to return to the capital with the love of his life and a young daughter who needs a father. In Lure's imagination, the image of the crazy Calix, who was indulging in all kinds of stupid and at the same time terrible things, appears again. The girl believes that he became this way precisely because of her. Therefore, now she has no moral right to leave him. The green-eyed one closes her eyes and realizes one very important thing. She values this fair-haired man very much. Lure always liked him, especially when he was still an innocent young man. But if the girl remembers the plot of the original novel, the desire to return to the capital disappears. Lure puts one hand in the other in excitement. This uncertainty of fate scares her. Moreover, Calix still doesn't know why the green-eyed is actually afraid of him. The guy thinks that her fear is related to his personality, like he does not inspire any trust, a sense of security. But it is not so. Lure clenches his hand into a fist. He and the fair-haired man had not yet had a chance to talk normally with each other, to understand everything that had happened between them. Then a terrible assumption comes to the girl's mind. What if they want to take Letty away from me? I can't stand it, she is the most precious thing I have. The girl continues to drill Calix's gaze, or rather his back. The only thing that pleases the dark-haired man is the man's strained relationship with Saya. Lure thought Calix loved this girl, but judging by his behavior with the goddess that night, they have a very strained relationship. The fair-haired man was constantly angry with Saya, shouted at her, asked her to let go. He hardly loves her. Lure's eyes widen in surprise. Calix, still standing by the door with his arms crossed over his chest, turns his head towards the girl. Does all this mean that Lure can be happy with Calix? Has fate really changed and the girl will not have to die in terrible agony? So many questions and so few answers. Day. It's a holiday at Lure's house. Little Letty's friends came for her birthday. Of course, they brought many gifts to the birthday girl. Sweets, toys, jewelry, etc. A lot of different dishes are on the festive table. Lure did a really good job on the guest menu, and baked chicken and salads and casseroles. Everything your heart desires. Everyone has already gathered in the hall. Someone calls out to the dark-haired man, "Lure, hurry!" The girl goes down the stairs and answers that she is already leaving. She is dressed in a simple but beautiful pink dress with a cream-colored skirt. Suddenly, Lure accidentally pushes a man in the shoulder and almost falls herself. But this man, Calix, manages to hold her by the waist at the last moment. The girl screams in surprise. The blonde looks straight into her eyes. After a second, Lure pulls himself together, smiles sweetly and casually says to the man, "You're sure you shouldn't be in the provincial governor's palace? It seems that Saya and the priest have gone to see him." The man's expression turns icy at the mention of the goddess. He indifferently replies that he doesn't care where the black-haired girl is now and what she does. Calix gently squeezes Lure's hand. Both he and she are a little worried. A giant monster appeared in the city. Will everything be okay? Lure lowers his eyes and says to himself, "Too bad it happened on Letty's birthday." Calix pats the girl's waist and then pulls Lure closer to her. He quietly says, "There is something more important than Saya. Therefore it makes no sense for me to go there." Lure seems to be hypnotized. She can't take her eyes off the fair-haired man. They seem to be kissing now. But it didn't happen as expected. This idyll is broken by Letty's exclamation. "Mom!" Lure sighs loudly. Although she loves her daughter, but now she would like to be alone with Calix. Letty, dressed in a festive blue dress, runs up to her mother and tells her, "Let's go together." Then she notices Calixus rushing somewhere ahead and asks his mother, "Oh, did Uncle come too?" Lure replies that Calix was just helping her. "He and I cooked a lot of food," says Green-Eyed. Letty hugs her mother and asks her another question. "Really?" Lure gently pats Letty's back and says, "Of course, all as you like, little girl." Calix, standing somewhere to the side, silently observes this picture of Lure and Letty approaching the festive table. The dark-haired woman turns to her daughter. "Sit down. I'll bring the cake now." Letitia sits down in the prominent place of the birthday girl and starts chatting with her friends. Lure looks at the happy children for a few seconds and then leaves the room. Suddenly, the girl starts to have a headache. The dark-haired woman's eyes widen. She stops and puts her hand on her forehead, not understanding where the pain came from. Tears appear in the girl's eyes. She closes her eyes and thinks to herself, "Maybe it's all because of the stress." Calix suits the dark-haired one. He asks her worriedly, "What is it, Lure? All right?" Through clenched teeth, Lure answers, "Yes." The dark-haired one hears her daughter's voice. "Mom?" The girl is trying to come to her senses. Little Letty anxiously asks her, "What's the matter with you?" Green-Eyed immediately stands up straight, smiles sweetly, and tells her daughter that everything is fine. Lure says this because he doesn't want to worry Letty and spoil her holiday. The girl looks at her daughter, who is standing next to Alice and a friend of the family, and wonders, does Calix know that Letitia is his child? Would it be strange to come to the holiday without knowing about it? Alice puts a yellow cap on the head of the little birthday girl. Lure continues to think about Calixus. What if he asks me about it? What should I say to him? Everyone starts applauding Letizia. Lure decides to think about it a bit later and joins in the applause. Calix, surprisingly, also claps his hands, although he doesn't do it very skillfully. Letty gets up from her seat and stares at her cake. He is really incredible. This work of culinary art is decorated with halved strawberries and buttercream. Calix drills Lure with a serious look, but the girl does not notice this. She stands at the table and watches Letitia blow out the candles on the cake with a smile on her face. But Alice seems to have seen Calix looking at Lure. The redhead leans over her friend's shoulder and begins to whisper something in her ear. Calix's expression turns somewhat grim. A few hours later, the celebration is already over. Lure is in the kitchen with his friends. They have almost finished cleaning. The dark-haired girl wipes the last plate with a towel and thanks everyone for their help. Suddenly, the girl opens her eyes wide. That horrible throbbing pain hit her head again. The girl grabs her forehead and leans on the table. This time, the pain is much stronger. Calix, who is about to leave, runs up to the girl. The man asks Lure if she is okay. Alice is also worried about her friend's condition. The redhead shouts, "Hey Lure, are you all right?" Green-Eyed settles down on the floor and quietly replies, "Yeah, just a little tired." Alice opens her eyes wide. She felt some strange magic around the girl. The redhead purses her lips. She does not like all this. But now is not the time to quarrel. Alice takes her friend's hand and calmly says, "We'll talk a little later in your room." She helps her friend up. Lure says with her eyes closed that everything is fine and she doesn't need help. Calix stands aside and silently watches Alice and Lure. The man looks displeased. Lure's room. Alice goes inside and closes the door behind her. Lure, sitting on the bed, asks her friend emotionlessly, "Elisa, why did you do that?" The redhead replies that she doesn't want anyone to hear them. Lure's eyes are full of sadness. The girl guesses what Alice wants to talk about the letter she sent to Calix. The redhead hides her hands behind her back. She is excited. Her eyes dart back and forth. Finally, Alice says, "I forgot. I've always been on my guard, but lately I've been too relaxed." The dark-haired woman does not understand what her friend is talking about. Alice continues, "I forgot that every person has a bit of darkness in them." After these words, the girl begins to tell what she saw recently. As she was going down to the first floor at dawn, she happened to see Sign. He was doing something in the kitchen. It was quite difficult to understand what exactly. The man was standing with his back to the door. When the red-haired girl quietly looked into the room, she saw that he was mixing something into Lure's tea. And it was a poison called torum, which causes infertility. Apparently, the boy poured it into Lure's favorite brown cup almost every morning. Sweat runs down the dark-haired woman's face. She covers her mouth with her hand and asks Alice, But why would he do that?" A friend says, "You yourself know how important it is for a nobleman to have an heir. Redhead leads to the fact that if Lure becomes barren, she will not be able to return to her ex-husband. In other words, you'll be with Will forever. The dark-haired woman's world is collapsing, shattering into small glass shards. But the girl tries to keep herself in her hands and think rationally. Even if so, why act so meanly? Alice looks at Lure nervously and continues. And that's why I needed the Duke to find you. But I didn't do it just because of Sane. The redhead looks tense. She seems to have a hard time talking about all this. The girl says that there have long been rumors among the nobles that the Duke is traveling around the continent. Alice sits down on the bed next to Lure and adds, and there was only one reason for that. The redhead looks into her friend's eyes and tries to prove to her that Calix really wanted to find her. Otherwise, why would he put himself and his people in danger for the sake of aimlessly traveling such great distances? Alice puts her hand on Lure's hand. The dark-haired one quietly says the name of the love of his life. Calix! Suddenly, someone starts breaking into the room. Alice and Lure shudder. The redhead jumps out of bed and quickly opens the door with the words, "Who's there?" The girls freeze in place. Lure puts his hand to his mouth and looks at the person outside the door of the room. William Osborne is sitting on the floor, confused and scared at the same time. He asks Alice, "Is all this true?" It seems that the man was eavesdropping on the conversation of his girlfriends. Lure wants to approach her husband, but the redhead stops her. "Don't approach him." Then the girl turns to Will himself. "Yes, it's true. Your father mixed poison in Lou's tea. It lasted about a month." The hair on young Osborne's head almost stands on end. He looks at the girls with a hazy look and says, "How so?" He grits his teeth in rage. "Why, father?" William crawls up to Lure, who is already sitting on the bed, bows his head and says to the girl, "I'm sorry, Lure. Let me apologize for my father." The man says that he could not even think that his old man was capable of such a thing. The dark-haired one glances at William, then puts a hand on his shoulder, wanting to calm and encourage him. The girl leans over to the depressed man and calmly but firmly says, "You have nothing to apologize for. You didn't know about it either. So you shouldn't blame yourself, Will." Hope appears in the man's eyes. He raises his head and says softly, "Thank you, Lure, but are you really going to let him go so easily?" Lure smiles faintly and replies that she has already forgiven Sana. The man reaches for Lure's face. He pats the girl's cheek and confesses to her, "Lure, I became your husband because I wanted to raise Letty as my own daughter. But," William continues, "I want you to be happy first of all. Therefore, I dare not keep you here." The man smiles sweetly. He truly wishes Lure and her daughter happiness. A second later, William adds, "Your life belongs to you alone." Lure looks into the man's face and thinks, these bright eyes are a sign of a person's kindness. And such a good person believed in her when she was in trouble. And it's not just Will who is still standing in front of the girl on his knees, but his father, Sane. Of course, Lure says to himself, he did a mean thing, but I can't forget what he did for me either. A light breeze enters the room through the open window. William gets down on one knee in front of Lure, takes her hand and says, "Lure, can I ask you one last thing?" The girl answers, "Of course I will do everything I can." The man lowers his eyes to the floor, and after a second stands up and hugs the dark-haired man tightly. The girl opens her eyes wide in surprise. She didn't expect Willem to do that. Having moved away a little from the shock, Lure says to the man, "Huh? Willa, is this really your request?" The girl does not know what to do, how to be. Eventually, she gently places her hand on William's back, hugging him back. Lure fears that someone might see them and spread rumors throughout the city. But the girl does not even suspect that Calix is watching this picture. William asks Lure to stand like this a little longer. The girl, as if by intuition, turns her gaze to the side and notices her lover. Desperation appears in the dark-haired woman's eyes. She's stuck. Calix stands with her arms crossed over her chest and looks at Lure and William with a murderous look. "Will, what's wrong with you?" was heard from the room behind the open door. A bright light pours in from there and some clearly interesting conversation takes place. Calix is standing on the threshold and cannot understand anything. He utters Lure's name with surprise and again incomprehension. All he wants now is to find out what is happening in this room. After all, it is definitely important for this. The guy bites his lip and analyzes what he saw. Despite everything, he can't understand anything. Lure, why are you? The young man asks. At that time, Will does not seem to hear or see anything. He still hugs Lure and asks to stay like that a little longer. The girl is not happy about this and does not understand the logic of the young man's actions at all, but she cannot do anything because he is stronger than her. Calix watches all this from the threshold. He was holding something in his hand and it fell to the floor. For him to see this scene was too cruel an ordeal. He did not understand why Lure was breaking his heart to pieces like that. The young man looked in front of him and there was really pain in his eyes. But at the same time you could trace madness there. The look of madness. Finally Lure notices Calix. She breaks out of Will's arms and fearfully asks, "Callies!" The girl did not expect such a turn of events and did not know how to act. Will was also embarrassed, a drop of sweat running down his face. Lure immediately rushes to Calix with an explanation. She claimed that he did not understand everything that way. Behind her back, Will wanted to restrain the named wife, but stopped, realizing that he had no right. The girl asks the man to explain everything, because he really didn't understand everything that well. She tries to find the right words, but the thoughts do not connect into one. Calix wants to hear her with all his might, but anger is taking over. He notices that Lure's whole face is pale. She really looks scared and disarmed and doesn't know how to act. Her green eyes widen. Calix roughly grabs her lover's hand and pulls Lure closer to her. She does not understand anything, and he asks why she is behaving like that now. Maybe she is panicking because he interfered with something important? The girl is completely scared. From behind, Will is shouting at Calix, who will at least listen to him. Meanwhile, Lure is still clinging to Calix, who doesn't seem to hear anyone. Will notices that he is hurting the girl, but he completely loses his mind and visual perception of the situation. However, the young man still takes matters into his own hands. He lets go of Lure's hand and says that she has been avoiding other people all along, but now he wants to protect Will. The girl, finally breaking free from Calix, rubs her hand, which hurts from such a hard touch. She does not understand anything and does not want to hear anything. "Is he really that important to you?" Calix asks. The girl is completely surprised and scared. Her eyes widen even more and fill with horror and despair. Maddened, Calix angrily grabs Will by the throat. He looks extremely angry and clearly has terrible intentions. Lure shouts at him to stop. She is already begging him, but he doesn't hear anyone or anything in his anger. She blurts out in horror that Will just wanted to hug her goodbye. They did not and could not have any hidden intentions. However, the most terrible thing is that her words do not affect Calix at all. He turns his gaze and says that it was impossible to understand everything wrong. He still strangles Will, and the look of hardness and hatred along with madness does not disappear. However, Lure grabs Calix's hand and says that she is not in any relationship with Will. She screams for him to calm down, but Calix, as if does not hear, and says that he would not have acted as he did now, because of some misunderstanding there. The guy is still choking Will. Something else happened in this argument. He says that all these years he thought only of Lure. Ta looks at Calix with surprise and misunderstanding of this conversation. The guy says that he even lost his common sense and admits it, but she didn't care at all. He angrily releases Will, who falls to the floor. Lure freezes in horror. Calix turns to her and continues to speak about the fact that now he cannot control himself, especially when I saw such a scene. His eyes are still full of hatred because he loves Lure so much. He spent so much time looking for her madly. The girl noticed to herself that she saw in his eyes, which were burning with anger and unprecedented sorrow. But his attempts to keep her close to him cause only pity. And she also realized that something really happened to Calix. The young man surprisingly agreed with her words. He said she was absolutely right. He stood on the floor and said that Oko could not trust him, hide anything, and he has the right and reasons to do so. But he just wants her to be by his side. Calix spoke this into Lure's ear, enunciating each word clearly and coming very close. He touched the surprised girl, who didn't like it at all, but she couldn't even move because of the shock. Calix said that he would not let her escape a second time under any circumstances. This completely stunned Lure. Sweat was dripping from her face. She spoke Calix's name and turned to him. He already looked better and radiated nothing but indifference. Someone found the room. The man asked to see the Duke for something that was troubling him, but the reason was not, it seems, a good one. A servant stood at the door, whom Calix asked displeasedly what had happened. He bowed and explained that the Duke had received a letter from the head of the province. It turns out that he invites the young man to his place. The servant brought the letter. Calix was surprised. It seems that the goddess has already managed to tell about him. Calix left Lure and ordered a carriage to be prepared. They will go now. The servant ran to carry out the order and prepare a carriage for the Duke. But before he left, Calix turned to Lure and said that if she wasn't here when he returned, anger flared in his eyes again. However, the girl didn't let the conversation end, so as not to hear senseless threats again. She simply said that she knows and understands everything. They met their eyes. Lure continued and said that she knew everything. She would be here until Calix returned, and he is not going to run away. He may not care. The girl firmly said this behind the boy's back. Despite everything that happened, she looked calm and beautiful. Her long hair was developing. Calix noticed this beauty immediately. After he left the room, so did Will, who was still there. He guiltily said that he would also go and asked Lure to rest well. The girl closed the door to the room and breathed a sigh of relief. So much has happened. Sweat was dripping from her face. It was all too scary and unexpected. Suddenly, she noticed a package on the floor that was emitting light. This surprised her, because she had not noticed anything before. Amazingly, Lure decided to pick it up and look at its contents. It was still emitting light. Did Calix leave him? The girl's eyes sparkled. But what could it mean, and what is there anyway? Now she will find out everything. Bluebird. There was a bluebird of incredible beauty shimmering with colors. It looked beautiful and luxurious. But there was a crack in this brooch. And Lure noticed her. She thought that Calix had brought such pain. He always remembered her regardless of what happened between them. And he was so kind to her. He never forgot his promise. And I just wanted her to be near. The next day, a feast was held in the village in honor of the arrival of the goddess and the Duke. Canello's people were called to come to the castle. People stood in the square of the street and read the announcements. It indicated that residents should come to be present at such a large-scale event. Lure was sitting at the table with her daughter. Someone entered their room, informing them that she had received a letter. Alice was standing on the threshold. Lure said that she knew. It seems that they will also have to go to the pier. The child looked at his mother with interest. Alice nervously clutched the letter in her hand. Sweat dripped from his face. She didn't want to go to the pier at all. Lure looked worriedly at her friend and explained that it was all in honor of the arrival of the Duke and the goddess. One of the houses on the island. So you and Aunt Alice are going to the ball? Daughter Lure combs her thick brown hair and asks about everything. She is interested in everything, but it is strange because she is still a child. So, for example, she asks her mother if she will be in a luxurious castle on their island. A child's eyes light up with delight and curiosity. However, Lure answers that she is just coming to say hello and asks to look around the house for the little one. The girl silently remarked to herself that the fact that she had at least one elegant dress left was a very good thing. Otherwise, it would be difficult to get out of this situation. Sweat runs down her face. However, she quickly switched to something more pleasant and smiled. Lure is sitting on a chair in a beautiful green dress with a white top, and a smile develops on her face. She thought with a laugh that if she didn't have this dress, she would have to go in everyday clothes. They will be worth sewing several dresses for special events. After all, things are different as, for example, today. And including the unpredictable. After all, even if she is a commoner, she still cannot appear at the ball in anything. Her thoughts are interrupted by her daughter, who affirmatively said that she is no longer a child, and will manage to take care of the house while her mother is away. She only asked, comb in hand, if Lure really liked her outfit. She turned in surprise. The daughter explained that she looks long in this dress and there is no beauty there. Lure was very touched by this and she burst into tears. "Mom, you're beautiful, but your clothes are a whole other story," explained the little one, brushing Lure's hair. She also said that as soon as she starts earning her own money, she will definitely buy her beautiful dresses. The girl said that her daughter is very kind and offered to choose jewelry for her outfit together. She opened the box, which contained many expensive jewels that sparkled. The child was very surprised by this. Both girls' green eyes sparkled as they looked at the jewelry. The little one chose the best that would suit her mother's image. And she did it very carefully. She thought and pointed to the blue bird. Yes, exactly the one that Calix gave earlier. Something in this choice of a daughter was strange for Lore. Her eyes widened in surprise. Why did the child choose this particular brooch? And she, in turn, interrupted her mother's thoughts and asked if she also liked this decoration. After all, she is constantly looking at her, but she smiled and said that she really likes the bluebird. The child on her lap laughed joyfully. Voga held a decoration in her hands. Did Uncle Carrot give it to her? I like Uncle Carrot, exclaimed the child. She asked if Lure liked him, which surprised and stunned the girl for a moment. She remembered his image. White hair, slender figure, strong arms, broad shoulders. The little girl looked at the bluebird brooch and said that she really liked Calyx, and she hopes that her mother likes it too, because it would be so wonderful. The child said that for her, Calyx is like a father, and this completely stunned Lure. Her eyes widened in surprise. A brooch in the form of a bluebird, presented by Calyx, was already adorning her chest. She thought and did not understand. Did Letty understand that Calyx is her father? After all, she didn't even say anything to her. How is this possible? The girl touched the brooch and everything became clear. The child understood everything without words. She felt that Calyx was her real father. Lure nervously touched the chair next to her. Suddenly, someone asked why she was worried. The girl raised her head in surprise. And who interrupted her thoughts? It was Alice. She sat down opposite her friend and reassured her that everything would be fine. At the ball, they will just come, say hello and go back home. She asked Lure not to screw herself up. Of course, she was also upset, but still she tried to take the situation under control. Lure smiled and agreed with her friend. They really should relax and not worry. Everything will be fine. Nothing bad can happen. Moreover, Calyx should be with Saya at the ball. Just like a couple in love from a movie. Tur imagined it. They were bound by the red thread of fate. And how should she be in this situation? Will she be able to hold back her tears, seeing them together if she can't do it now? She definitely wouldn't mind seeing them together again. Castle courtyard. The bright sun shone on all its corners. Water poured from the fountain. Birds sang and a festive atmosphere reigned. The holiday lasted. People were gossiping that the head of the province was spending time with the goddess, and his son was already drunk and would not appear at the event. Calyx leaned against the wall in a festive costume, and thought that even people on the edge of the world were not different at all. Everyone just wants to gossip. He noticed that they were all equally rotten. Sadness and incomprehension appeared in his eyes. Suddenly a girl appeared in front of him. She was wearing a blue and white dress and her hair was also white. The stranger greeted the Duke and bowed to him and called herself Amelia Kynal. The girl looked directly into Calyx's eyes. She said that this meeting is an honor for her. And pure blue eyes shone. However, Calyx was not interested in this girl. He looked at her with indifference and cut her off to go on her way. The boy let her know that she was not happy here. But Amelia was not at all swayed by these words. She said that the Duke did not have a glass and this situation should be corrected. The girl came very close to the boy, holding out a glass. The boy did not expect this. However, she very quietly and already angrily asked Calyx to play along with her. She was not happy about this ball either, and the Duke in general from what was happening. The girl explained that her father had ordered her to spend time with the Duke, and he was very sharp. Her father was actually talking sweetly to a lady in the hall. Calyx was disgusted by such a scenario, but Amelia asked her to play along while her father watched them. She quickly took the situation into her hands and began to act. With a flirtatious smile, she said that the Duke's glass could not be empty on such a holiday, and began to pour it for him. Calyx did not like the fact that the girl was pouring him whiskey. However, she said that it is not necessary for him to drink it. But she will not refuse. At least until her father went with the guests to another room. The Duke noted that her father was seeing off the guests. The girl turned around. It was indeed so. She called her father an old man and exclaimed that he made her nervous. She snatched a glass of whiskey from Calyx's hands and drank it in one gulp. The young man noticed that she was drinking, as if out of control. He tried to stop the girl, but she only apologized for the inconvenience and promised to reward Calyx one day. She finally got down to business and asked if the Duke didn't think the goddess was a scary enough person. He was surprised and did not understand their question. He asked what exactly she meant. They both turned their gazes to the goddess who was already in the hall. While they were talking, the goddess kept looking at them. Even though guests came up to her and talked to her, she was smiling sweetly. but Amelia asked Calix to explain everything to the goddess so that there would be no misunderstanding. He looked indifferently at the woman. Amelia bowed and said that it was her time. She said she would look forward to their second meeting with the Duke, but he remarked to himself that he had had enough of the first. He sighed tiredly and exclaimed that this girl made him incredibly nervous. He shouldn't be here at all. His hands clenched nervously. He remembered Lore on the day of his departure. She then promised that she would not run away and would be by his side as he wanted. She spoke so faithfully and asked not to worry. It seemed as if she might betray him at that very moment. However, Calix was looking ahead with a thoughtful look. However, if she runs away from him again, he can't let that happen, but if that happens, he won't survive anymore. His thoughts were interrupted by the head of the castle, who was greeting the guests. He smiled and introduced himself. At that time, Alice and Lure entered the hall. Calix looked at their images with interest. Rose! My name is Rose Winterwood Obzon. Lure introduced herself. Calix did not understand anything at all.